So today I'm here with Jose and Austin. I'm retarded. Can't remember your last names. What was last names?
Jose Galison and then Austin
Picard. Yeah.
Yeah, our podcast. We have a very interesting subject today. We're going to break down the Oklahoma City bombing. It's the 30th anniversary today. I think we'll probably have this out tomorrow, but this is actually a subject I don't know a whole lot about. Recently, I've got more into conspiracies, realizing the government is doing a lot of bad stuff. Yes. You know, last night I didn't go too deep into it because you said I didn't need to, but I spent about 30, 40 minutes. I saw a lot of connections between like 9/11 and stuff like that.
God. We were just talking about that in the car, honestly.
Really seeing a lot of connections between, because I've gone deep down 9/11. I was just seeing so many connections. But like I said, you don't really get much in 30 minutes. But he said I didn't need to go too in depth. So why don't you just start it off?
Yeah, well, I mean, just start off, I feel like the best place to start is the official narrative, so we know kind of what we're working with. Essentially what was crafted to be the official narrative over time from the government became, on April 19th, 1995, Timothy McVeigh with some sort of, Terry Nichols taking on like a supporting role in some sort, not an on-the-ground role, so just kind of like helping with materials, putting together that stuff of that that Timothy McVeigh, by himself, drove up a Ryder truck to the Murrah Federal Building and detonated it at 9:02 a.m., thus killing 168 people, 169 debatably. There was an extra leg that is a point of contention for some people who like to really get in the weeds of research, but 168 is kind of the official tally. And so, I mean, I think 19 kids. Yeah, wow. That's usually what people bring up.
Yeah, that really gets people.
I mean, this was been proposed as essentially a form of retribution for things like Ruby Ridge and Waco. Exactly. Which, for those who want to dig into that, I know it's kind of hard to bring this up without actually digging into it. But we just dropped a almost 3-hour episode, me and Austin, on my channel, No Way Jose podcast. So for those of you who want to dig into that, it's there. But like
on
obviously,
Waco
on Waco.
Oh,
so because we knew they were gonna be like, this is opening a rabbit hole, and you're like, well, we're already deep in one rabbit hole, so it'd be good to have that ready for people.
Was it the anniversary of Waco?
Yes, today is also the anniversary of Waco. It's the 32nd anniversary of Waco today. So how this was framed is this was retribution from the racist, extreme, dissident, whatever term you want to use, right at that time. Which I mean, I think a lot of us can see a lot of commonalities between those sort of narratives then and now. And those things kind of reverberate through time, but yeah, that was how it was framed. Yeah,
dude. I mean, Waco itself. This is what I found so interesting.
Awful.
Yeah, because as we covered Waco, I honestly believe, like, again, consider the fact that Ruby Ridge, 1992. Then you have within 6 months, Waco happens. Right, Waco pops off.
I didn't realize it was that close because I was young when all this happened.
Yeah, it's stunning, honestly, and especially considering the overlap of the government agents and officials that were actually involved. Because, again, this very much reeks like some sort of covert operation to some degree that, mirrors.
Which we will get to. But
we'll get
into
it.
I'm not,
I won't. I promise. But it very much resembles like COINTELPRO, right? Which was at the time, it was seemingly kind of the idea was that you're going to have government agents infiltrate the left-wing movements who are opposing like the Vietnam War or various movements like this.
Civil rights movement.
The civil rights movement was a huge
we've seen feds in all the right-wing organizations, tons of them. Like you look at the Bundy case, the January 6th, so we know feds infiltrate them. Real quick, for people that don't know, in Waco, I think it was 25 kids were murdered by the ATF, came in and murdered, and tons of adults too, but children. They lit the place on fire, burned them to death.
28 women and children.
Yeah, and the guys are like posing with pictures after, like no big deal.
Disgusting,
just absolutely disgusting.
And you know what they said? This is crazy because this was during the congressional inquiry following the ATF siege of the Branch Davidian complex in Waco. Henry Ruth, one of the three independent reviewers from the U.S. Treasury Department, he testified. This is the craziest part to me, and I always tried to spotlight this because he says the ATF needed good publicity. With its appropriations hearings a week away, a successful raid this size would produce major positive headlines to counter the ATF's reputation as a rogue agency whose debacles blackened the reputations of other agencies, and it would scare the public enough about fringe groups to create political pressure on Congress to increase its budget.
So we see you go from Ruby Ridge to Waco, and from Waco being obviously like a kind of a trying to
blunder.
A PR blunder, trying to repair that. And then if anything, they only made even more of a blunder. And then what comes 2 years later? The Oklahoma City bombing, which really couldn't have been anything better for the Fed. So if you play this Key Bono or like who benefits type game, I mean, this has some dark dark implications.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean that's the case, but I mean, in effect, due to this, essentially at the time, the largest act of domestic terrorism on American soil. Actually, it was the largest act of terrorism on American soil at that point. Now I think it's currently the domestic terrorism. Yeah. But what that ended up doing to the narrative that was playing out there, all that the strong right militia movement that was gathering around, and kind of this hatred against establishment and the government, they managed to subvert that and turn that to look at these people, look at what they're willing to do. Yep. They will hurt innocents. Mm-hmm. There was an ATF building in there, but or ATF thing. There was an IRS, in the ATF federal building, but it's like there were also children. And I think any one of us here can say, like, while we may hate the ATF or any Fed glowy group, we're not going to kill children because that's what differentiates us and them.
No right person to do that. And what really popped to me is not a single ATF agent died, and that was the tax on the ATF building.
Not a single ATF agent was in there.
But they happened to just not be in their. And it was at 9:02 a.m. and they started 8 a.m. This is something last night I saw, and I'm just like, oh my god.
Their overnight surveillance thing, which because the story became initially. I think there was one before they initially were to try to claim they were there. There was some crazy elevator escape stories that were completely shown to be nonsense later. That turned into later, oh, no, they were on a golf trip. And I think that the thing they did kind of settle on last is there was an overnight surveillance that some of the boys was working on. Mm-hmm. It does kind of seem like, I don't know, it's kind of odd that there was an overnight surveillance. None of you guys were there on the day of the bombing. There's probably some other things we'll point to through the course of this, that this starts fitting into a larger narrative where you start to be like, what is going on here? What is this overnight surveillance thing? Perhaps, I guess it's a little bit of a spoiler here, perhaps we're maybe at the low end, at the absolute low end, in my opinion. I guess at the lowest end, you would say there's a cover-up here, maybe a little bit higher than there. There's direct, Sting type, move. Mm-hmm. But at the very least, I would say, there was cover-up and likely some sort of sting operation, and it went sour.
As many of you know, I have many controversial guests, so that comes at a cost of being demonetized everywhere. So if you want to support the program, go to fightbackpodcast.com, and I have all kinds of merch on there, whether it's jiu-jitsu, fighting, political, and other accessories. And thanks for the support.
Yeah. Now, we can go further, and I actually kind of tend to believe a little bit further, but at the very least, that's kind of where I think you can, I don't know, if you want to, hang out in the realm of, credible experts or whatever, that's the place where, at the very least, we can show there were over 24, there were over 20 surveillance tapes, over 20 people that saw that we never got to see, and there was over 20 people that saw a second person with Timothy McVeigh on the day of the bombing. Literally every eyewitness who saw McVeigh the day of the bombing saw him with another person. Mm-hmm. Yet somehow they're able to use all of those people to say, hey, we have, Timothy McVeigh, he did this, but no, you guys all made up this other guy. This guy doesn't exist. And then also on top of that, we have Secret Service documents that they did their own investigation, and maybe the right hand wasn't talking to the left hand here, and they released that, we saw a second person coming out. They were suspects. There was a second person who came out of that truck. You even said might have better recall of this. There was an was it an NBC, Dateline NBC?
Yeah, basically.
The Dateline NBC, they tried to,
John Doe number 2. Everyone saw him. Not everyone, but lots and lots of people saw 2 people.
Right. But anyways, there was real quick, there was an LA agent. Sorry, just to clarify, there was an LA agent that tried to sell a Dateline NBC, the surveillance tape that showed someone else coming out. He's about to read the actual source document here, but that showed the second person, and he tried to sell it for $1 million. The only reason we know this is because there was an informant at NBC. Yeah. That's the only reason we know about it. So that kind of ties right into Mockingbird right there. So go ahead.
Exactly, man. And you have to realize, when you're running a covert operation domestically, you have to run misdirection tactics. You have to blow smoke and mirrors, right, to kind of distract the public perception of what's playing out in front of you. And then also, it's a way to kind of compartmentalize the operation as it plays out to where you can, one, have plausible deniability in the terms of the operators on the ground, but you can also kind of let's say the intent is to truly go live, in green light, one of these domestic terror operations. It would be much easier if each section of this strange intelligence domestic operation that's being clandestinely, at least pursued, within this framework, then it perfectly fits as far as I'm concerned, especially with all the strange reports that we got into a little bit in the car, just an additional Ryder truck being seen by certain witnesses. Oh, wow. But it's crazy. And then of course McVeigh himself kind of within just very small amount of time after the actual bombing takes place, he's apprehended, right? And he's he's
For a
like
basic traffic stop. I
Yep,
read it wasn't
that's
like
driving
someone,
without
it
a-
wasn't
with a
like they knew who he
license plate.
was. It was just
Yeah.
they don't just pull over and arrest people.
in the
Well, he was
arresting
driving without a
officer-
license plate. And
Especially a white
it was
guy.
like an hour after
Exactly.
one of the largest at that time terrorist event. He's driving without. I mean, I've heard theories that maybe it was like a drop car and that something went wrong and that like John Doe 2 ditched him or something like that. And so like this was a drop car, and the idea that because there was like actually they found propaganda in it stuff. So the idea being that this would be the car that you would leave behind to kind of like be like, you know, kind of leave your little insignia, your propaganda, like, oh, here we did it type deal. But I think he may have gotten deserted. You know, maybe some plans went awry,
Yeah, maybe
and
he
now
was
all
just
I
like,
have the
He
drop.
was like the patsy. They kind of left
Brother,
him.
I was
to throw
about
the
to
bus.
say he was placed firmly on the path of the patsy. Honestly, it mirrors Oswald in many ways.
No, I'm saying that there's so many links when you look at stuff.
100%.
And same thing, like, you know, back to 9/11, the guys that didn't, the ATF didn't show to work. Who didn't show up to work? The Lucky Larry and his family, the guy who owned the building.
Yeah.
An Israeli company, Zim Shipping, had just moved out like a week prior, broke their lease. Is it Ogden, whatever? They got text messages saying not to go to work, an Israeli company. So it's like,
and who owned the contract for the elevator systems in the actual building?
George Bush's brother was that. Yeah, I stumbled across that.
Is
the
that
other way.
not
You know, I started
insane?
going down these rabbit holes. And I saw that, and I'm like, why have I never heard that? I just saw recently. Like, how is that not relevant? It's very fucking relevant.
Obviously, I mean that is.
You start seeing the connections between all these different things, like you're saying, and that's when you start being like, "Holy shit, maybe it is real." When there's so many, like this subject we're talking about earlier is gonna get dark, but the child trafficking stuff. But
oh jeez.
but it's
Yeah, that's where the veil truly falls to the wayside, and you kind of, at least can to some extent, identify and catch a glimpse of the true enemy and the actual threat we face as just the threat that we really need to honestly like at least to some degree we have to manufacture this some sort of defense mechanism and have it very much in place, like psychologically at the very least, if you want to be a parent that knows what's out there that could, as far as, but anyway, I won't get too far off base and get
no, but I
into
think
that
it's
right
important
away.
though. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying be crazy, but you should have some assault rifles. You should,
man.
teach your kids safety. You should maybe
Exactly.
have some stash. I'm starting to be like, oh, maybe these preppers weren't as crazy as I thought. I never paid attention to politics, but you start looking. You start understanding these groups a lot more, like why these groups exist, why they're there, because they are correct about the government being a threat, or at least in some aspects, or a lot of aspects. The biggest investigation in FBI history, do you guys know what that was? January 6th. The biggest, that was a joke. It was like grandmas walking through the building. That was by far their largest manpower investigation they've ever done.
Right.
And they were, I mean, I'm not a huge Trump fan, but it was great that he pardoned everyone on the first day, because that was a shameful.
nice,
People were
yeah.
doing like 30 years in prison and stuff for a
ridiculous.
small like riot protest.
Talk about a miscarriage of justice, which is exactly what, continues to rear its ugly head every time you kind of like just dip just a tiny fraction below the surface, and then this monstrosity of a very well established network reveals itself to essentially have been really, in my mind, essentially manufactured and put into place for generations at this point, right? And you can trace
January
this
6th
back.
was all feds. It was
Exactly,
after
brother.
that, and then they
It
go
was-
arrest these people, and putting someone in prison for like 30 years is taking their life away. You start realizing these people are your enemy. I was shocked that conservatives weren't more outraged by that. The liberals everyone should have been outraged like that. I would have been outraged if they did that to the BLM people, even though I don't agree with
Right.
them.
Exactly.
You have to
But
perceive
you have
justice.
principle, Jake. There's a huge difference because a lot of people are being sold this kind of like,
Hatred towards the opposite side.
it's the duality of the two-party delusion, honestly, in my mind, and I very much opt out.
I'm out of that too. Exactly. I think the two-party system is part of the problem.
100%.
Everyone jumps on their party,
Right.
and they take the side, and they're like, "Oh, this is right. This is right." When really, both sides are selling us out.
Exactly.
Neither side's our friend.
We remain on the path toward the dystopian totalitarian state. I mean, that is reality, and the technocracy is a very much huge part of it. But we'll get back to OKC.
Yeah, they
because I
played.
don't
They
want-
played both sides because, like, we'll get into Pat kind of in a second.
Right.
I think you were about to read
Yeah.
the one document, the specifically how the informant characterized it.
Right.
Which I mean, I don't know exactly the motivations. It was redacted in the document here, the specific name of the informant. But I mean, it's still just astounding me they had an informant at NBC
That's fascinating,
Dateline,
man.
and then it is funny that like they're describing it to them in these documents, and
It's
I mean,
crazy.
but yeah, it is kind of wild to
The
hear
informant was
them.
like ATF or FBI or who
It
did the
was
informant work for? The
FBI was an investigative. Yeah, so it's basically these
They're
official
watching. They're
investigators.
watching the media and stuff. Well, a lot of it is CIA and stuff. You realize, but they're all part of it and watching it. And
100%. And plus, each agency basically is, they sort of have like overlapping agendas in place as well with like smaller groups of operatives, but still, they kind of reinforce right? The false narratives and the misconceptions, but still, so this is very interesting. And again, it's like really what J6 was an extension of PATCON in many ways, and the Oklahoma City bombing, right? Which we can define PATCON.
Yeah,
in a
we'll get
moment.
that in a second.
We'll
Let's
get to
read
it for sure.
Yeah.
But so this essentially is just hours after the bombing, right? This essentially, you have Brad Edwards, right, working for basically NBC at the time, and he was giving the latest on this exclusive report that was first of all reported in the LA Times. And so this is where it starts, basically, which is Timothy McVeigh, obviously not the last person to leave the Ryder truck. In fact, another man sat inside the cab of the truck after McVeigh got out. We believe that man is John Doe number 2, a man who, for all we know, is still on the loose, leaving open a vital question. This is the introduction to the actual report. Was it John Doe number 2 who actually set off the bomb, not Timothy McVeigh, as we've been led to believe? News Channel 4 has for weeks been, and I think it's just a local affiliate, obviously, of NBC, but has for weeks been demanding copies of the surveillance tapes from the FBI. The federal government so far, of course, dragging its feet. So the LA Times report shows there was a surveillance camera near the corner of 5th and Harvey and another near the corner of 5th and Robinson. Federal investigators recreated the time sequence leading up to the bombing by matching the video and still photos from the surveillance cameras. And, of course, this has to be essentially described to the public because the official authorities refused to actually hand over the tapes.
Have they never been released?
They've never been released.
They've never released the tapes.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, how can
there's
they
an
do that?
asterisk there. What they did eventually release
Right,
later,
right.
and this actually, I guess, will be kind of a good way to maybe tie into PATCON because Jesse Trentadue is kind of really, if there's there's multiple heroes to be had in the story of Oklahoma City bombing, but so far as I guess living people still doing big stuff. You got Jesse Trent out there. He's a lawyer. His brother died under extremely suspicious circumstances in relation to all of this. Now, through the course of his multi-decade legal battle against the federal government, he has uncovered multiple documents and stuff throughout. One of which that he's uncovered throughout his crusade has been the existence of a federal program called an FBI program called PATCON, which was so we have federal documents correcting this. He even later got in touch with John Matthews, a PATCON operative, who kind of walked him through all of this. But essentially, this is, as we mentioned before, we talked about COINTEL. This is the same thing, but for the right. And now, throughout this era, this was supposedly, I think it officially ended in '93, right?
Allegedly.
Yeah. So allegedly ended in '93. And so kind of this ran all the way through up until Fast and Furious, in my opinion, because there's connections to the Lone Wolf gun store, according to John Matthews. So they said they were using that as part of their operations at the time.
By the way.
Yeah,
Fascinating stuff.
That's something I'm fascinated in, but we won't get
we won't get into
that.
that.
No, that's something I'm fascinated. Like I said, good friends with Dan. He was showing me video the other day of him out there, and it was just, you could hear the 2 guns shooting, and then there's one where you could see it look like guns are coming out of a lower floor. I'm just what the hell? The video is right off his phone. It's like, wow.
It's fascinating stuff, man.
but yeah,
That's a whole separate. Yeah, so they are all kind of connected to a lot of these stories.
Yes,
you
they are.
guys.
Yep.
Well, back to 9/11 real quick. You mentioned there was a news report. There's a news report in 9/11. They had a van full of explosives. All of a sudden, that was covered up by the police commissioner. He happened to just be. He was in Israel a month before, and he'd been donated several $100,000 by some rich billionaires.
What do you know? And there was another van that actually fit the exact same description. So there were multiple vans, and it had
Urban
mural
Mover,
of the Twin Towers smoking after being hit by a plane.
And Urban Mover vans were also where the planes went down, that was the Israeli company that sought agents. It's a whole separate subject.
we can once again to make parallels to 9/11. We can go into there is a lot of people get into the details of the bombing itself.
And once you start seeing the connections between all the different places, it becomes a little more realistic. I think we don't want to get too off subject, but you just start seeing they did the exact same thing here. There was a recon van the day before by the World. So you start seeing, you start digging. I've done enough digging that one to be like, this is definitely real.
Yeah.
But having Oklahoma City, I'm still new to. So let's go on so we can get into this.
Yeah, so
sorry, I
we
keep
got
getting sidetracked.
PATCON. Jesse Trentadue, who was a lawyer, I believe based out of Utah at that time. I think he grew up in California, something like that. But either way, his brother, like I said, he did die under very suspicious circumstances, which, that's a topic that we probably should circle back to the multiple people who've died under extremely suspicious circumstances throughout all of this. Ooh. We probably, on the drive over, talked about at least 5 of them. So there's a lot of weird people just dropping like flies. But anyway, just to make it short, which we'll come back to that, we have Jesse Trentadue, he got sucked in this because of his brother dying. They killed, it looks like the feds killed some guy who to all intents and purposes, most people think, oh, this is just some generic, white bumpkin type guy with some sort of, record because he was there for breaking parole and something he had charges of bank robbery. Anyways, he matched kind of John Doe 2 at the time. So we can come back to that. So that's what dragged Jesse into it. Never they just so happened to kill the wrong guy because it happened that he had a brother who was a lawyer, really just a smart guy, kind of takes no nonsense. Just kind of an old, he's like a Vietnam vet. Like he's a crusty old, he does not take no crap, and you killed his brother. That's Jesse trying to do in a nutshell. He's actually, I'd highly recommend if you can, he'd be someone to totally get on because I don't know. He's currently under a gag order, which is another rabbit hole.
Jesus.
But so there's still certain things I think he can talk to.
Just seems so unconstitutional to me.
That Dodd Matthews guy I was just talking about a minute ago, he got put on a gag order because he was a PatCon operative that went to go testify for Jesse Trentadue. And according to Roger Charles, who is a deceased, author, who had a lot to do with all of this, but he claimed on the stand at the time that Matthews told him that the FBI got in contact with him and said it's alluding to that if he testified, they were going to pull his veteran's disability because he was a guy who took up became a PatCon ASA after being a veteran. So he retired. I mean, a lot of times with these PatCon operatives, they're or just informants in general. It's because they got you on something, and so now you're working for him. Now he was actually one of those guys that he bled. He was kind of guy who bleeds red, white, and blue. He had that patriotism. He thought he was doing something right, and then over time he became disillusioned and said, "I don't think what I'm doing here is right." And that's why he then later kind of talked to Jesse Trentadue. So, but he went to go take the stand, and the FBI contacted him and said basically hey, if you do this, we might be looking at another homeless veteran right here. For those who aren't aware, when you're in the military, especially if you sustain any injuries, you're likely to get pretty cake benefits, for disability, assuming you jump through the hoops to get paid decent. Yeah, so they were basically threatening his entire livelihood if he exposed the PatCon operation. And when they did that, then they brought that to the judge saying the FBI did that. That became then a federal witness tampering. And then that became, now he's accusing the FBI of federal witness tampering. Now we need to put a seal on all of this. And that's been, I think, over a decade. I want to say 14 years. I might be wrong exactly when that happened, that they've been under. They brought it to a special master or whatever, some sort of different judge, I think, that's going to manage that. I don't know what's going on. As we talk about this left-right system, he actually recently appealed to the current administration. And so these are judges he put in place, and they're still saying no, because he's trying to ungag that order so they can talk about PatCon, so they can drop all this information that, that Jesse's not allowed to speak about right now. But no, right now we only have people like us that are able to speak about this specific thing. He's legally not allowed. But I think, once again, if you did bring him on, there's so much. He's one of the top experts. There's just certain stuff you might be legally, I can't talk about this.
Gag orders are just so unconstitutional. You say you can't talk about things. Kind of off subject, but how they're pretending they're releasing old files and they're holding big parts back. The Epstein files, they gave empty binders. Just dude, why are they they're just pretending they're releasing shit.
False transparency. That's truly what it is. And it's a huge aspect of kind of what played into the misconception surrounding the OKC bombing as well, because you consider Modern Mockingbird and the role that they played as well. It was very, very limited.
Mockingbird, the media, when they took over the media, the CIA
infiltrating
the media,
which is fascinating. Honestly, I did a 5-part series so far with William Ramsey, and he's
we'll hit some of these side subjects then.
Yeah.
Hey guys, Jake Shields here. If you want to support Fight Back Podcast, our brand new sponsor is Think Zinc. They're a company that supports free speech and they're opposed to genocide. This is a 7-1 formula with all the highest grade vitamins and minerals. It has magnesium, zinc, vitamin E, vitamin C, and house and MCT oils. This is great for elite athletes and the common person. Methylene blue has been used for over 100 years for medical purposes and recently surged back into popularity. It has been shown to help repair brain tissue and improve memory, cognitive function, energy, and mood. Research suggests that methylene blue could have neuroprotective effects, possibly aiding in conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and depression. Go to MerakiMedicinal.com and use the promo code FIGHTBACK for a discount. I think with Mockingbird, the CIA basically took over the media, correct? Now I think they're doing the same thing with influencers. You just need us. They're all doing the exact same tweets. And
I'm telling you, you've been seeing some heat recently with some of your anti-Semitism, right?
Yeah. SPLC. They're trying to shut me down. CAN did a hit piece on me. Douglas Murray's, trying to bash me. All in the same week. You're like, oh, they're trying to. That means my podcast is getting big.
It's all the right.
That's how the right people hate me. That's how I know.
They're like, oh, we were all against censorship when it was COVID, but censorship for Jews, that's okay.
SPLC guy, little goblin. I call him a little kid fucker.
Yeah.
I think he left that part out of the thing, right up. That's somebody in the shit I was telling to him. I just looked at one look, and I'm like, oh, bro, you fuck kids like your boss, because their boss had got like trying to rape his own daughter. They're just disgusting, vile people. These organizations, the ADL and the SPLC, they're just the most disgusting, vile people. Calling us hateful.
I mean, it was founded on a lie, Leo Frank, but I mean, we're not here for that.
Right? There's so many. There's so many topics we could hit. But yeah, let's circle back to Oklahoma State bombing, because we could go. It is all kind of connected though, a lot of this stuff. So I think it is important sometimes to show. It's everywhere. They're always doing the same 100%. Lies, same tactics.
Yeah, and but I will say anti-Semitism is the new justification, right, for violating free speech.
What a disappointment Trump is trying to pass these anti-Semitism laws, Like, I don't hate Jews, but I have a right to hate Jews. If I want to hate Jews, I can hate Jews. It's like my First Amendment right to. I'm allowed to say, fuck Jews. I don't, not to edit that. Fuck Jews. No, personally, I don't. I'm not hateful to Jews. People try to say I am, but it's like, no, I'm pushing Israel, the control of the government. And
they're upset because you have... essentially, you fit the dissident profile, and you're right. And if you're pointing out what is so clearly obvious, which is unfortunately, why is there such an extreme overrepresentation of this small, tiny minority, right? In all these, arms reach from kind of like just pulling the strings, right, of the power cabal. Honestly, but it's very interesting.
It's clear that there's a lot of Jews at the top. It's not. I've come to the conclusion it's not just them.
No,
I am realizing the CIA is definitely very much a part of it. Absolutely. The more investigation I've done, I still think they're kind of the top power of it.
We have CIA connections for you here to get to that.
But no, I am realizing the CIA is very much a part of it too. The more I start digging, okay, you can't just blame the Jews.
There's layers.
There's a lot though. There's a lot they're doing.
Yeah, there's layers to this. Now, I will say my overall theory when it comes to Oklahoma City bombing is I do think this is a layered operation. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the things that I think you can prove with the stuff we've kind of talked about now is stuff like John Doe 2. So at the very least, even if you're not going to go down the rabbit holes that maybe we will go and the implications that may have, at the very least, there was a second person that was seen by literally every person who saw McVeigh that day that managed to escape justice. And now why that would be, I don't know. Literally the head investigator, the FBI's lead investigator, Danny Coulson himself, has later stated that the case should be reopened for this very reason. And he's made multiple implications. We were just talking before about like the way he talks, it sounds like he kind of knows something, but I don't know what happened to him. It seems like he clearly was not happy with how things probably went. That's how my read of it. And so he probably slight little bit of info here and there, kind of like, hey, kind of wink, wink, maybe you guys should do something with this. But obviously, probably to some extent, being as high up in the FBI as he was at the time was probably limited in what he can say, which I can totally get. I can't imagine how outraged I would be as someone who did that, especially if you're someone who buys into this. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have a negative view of the feds in general, but I can understand. I did over a decade of active duty military. I ended up leaving and become disillusioned with it, but like. I understand the concept of like I'm willing to do violence or do what some people think would be wrong because you think you're helping someone or doing something for the betterment of society or whatever. But I think once you start to analyze it, you realize, oh crap, I'm doing more harm than good. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here. But I do get the impression Danny Nichols, and I do get the impression he probably was some sort of good guy, and I think he may have kind of had that crisis of conscience in that moment, if I had to guess. I mean, obviously, I'm kind of reading his mind here, but given the statements he said, like, hey, we should reopen this. He buys into the John Doe 2 thing. He will, the lead FBI investigator has on multiple occasions referenced that, like, hey, look how many the other people saw John Doe 2.
That means, like, for sure it's true. Yeah, and he probably knows a lot more, but he's probably
maybe
scared for his life or controlled. And like I said, a lot of people maybe start out as good people. And they get, or some become bad, but some get disillusioned and like walk away from it.
We were talking, I guess maybe this would be a good jumping off point for getting to some of the suicides. We were talking on the way over here about Terrence Hickey and Kenneth Trendu, both how they died. Now there's a character.
Who are these guys? Were they involved?
Terrence Hickey was the first guy to show up at the Oklahoma City band, the first responder. Now obviously we can come back to this, but he kind of, according to he had a long report that said a bunch of stuff. His agency then threw it out. There's his ex-wife that he makes claims that he when he first came out of the hospital, he like immediately broke down crying. He says they're lying to you. Like there's a lot. I mean, he was very secretive. I mean, when you get into that story, so it is like, but there is a lot. Like there's a letter to an individual named Ramona McDonald that really kind of lays it out, like kind of his perspective, and he kind of leans into the sting type of operation. There was some sort of sting occurring. I mean, he refers to like ATF people that he sees showing the scene. And kind of like, having some sort of suspicions about them. He also speaks about how odd it is, about him being the first one there, and how quickly the feds arrive on scene in full riot gear. So
how quickly were they there?
I mean, I don't think it's specific, but I mean, he was there within minutes, and Yiki was the first one there.
In riot gear too. That typically takes a little bit of time.
So, which if they were doing an overnight surveillance one, it would check out, right? If they were nearby, across the street at the courthouse, where there had been spotted bomb crews the night before at the federal courthouse across the street.
Crews the night before.
Yes, there were bomb squads reported to be seen by multiple people, and you pair that with the idea of that I mentioned how one of their stories was that the ATF was on an overnight surveillance mission and they were watching another building across the street, and tie in the fact of PatCon and like we have, and imagine if you have, let's say there was some, let's just theoretically say there was some sort of sting. You were supposed to roll up in a across the street in a let's say a truck that had no bomb in it. Maybe there was even a transponder or something so they can track it. And then ta-da, then they all come out guns ablaze and they go, we got you. And then we got our cool picture moment. Now, what does it take for that whole thing to fall apart? Just someone on the inside who goes, oh, I just want to change a couple little things. And now things go much, much, much differently. So that's kind of the implication of the PatCon. If I would say if there was a sting operation, that's where you see PatCon. Yeah. So I think that PatCon was actually like a joint task force of sorts. So it was primarily an FBI thing, but when you look into the bones on it, which I would say this book right here, Aberration of the Heartland, The Real, does a really good job of bringing it down. That's Wendy Painting's book. Kind of going into there was kind of like a joint nature to it. So they worked in conjunction with like the National Guard and stuff like that, which is actually kind of a key component in McVeigh's story, and that like he may have gone over to the National Guard. Wasn't
there people spotted like the day or two before, like suspicious people? I think I read
something
coming through the building.
I think they were in the parking garage. There was Ruth Graham and Jane Schwab. Sometimes I get dyslexic and mix up their last names, but either way, those two. They saw what people essentially look like in the parking garage. People planting something, I guess you could say, along the lines of like C4 or something like that, like placing charges, that cord. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, when it gets to bombing analysis, it gets cagey. I mean, obviously, I know we said the Douglas Murray blow up about the experts. Like, have you ever been to Oklahoma City?
We can't talk about it. Douglas Murray, who's an English bachelor. He's the expert.
I will say bombing. That's kind of fair. I mean, let's be real. Like when you get the ins and outs, it's kind of like there's mathematics. Now there is but you can get into the expert game. You can play well. I mean, a lot of people bring up General Parton, who was an individual who came out, had a bombing report that said that like, hey, there's no way this could have been an ANFO bomb. Yeah. So I tend to think that's the case, but I don't know. I could be proven either way. I don't find that to be necessarily necessary to even buy into it, but it is an interesting.
They're messing with something.
Yeah, there's something weird.
They were in the building at least, like spotted doing suspicious activity. Is kind of what I was reading.
Maybe. I mean, I don't really see any reason why they have to lie. I know there are people out there that will say. I think one of them came on Alex Jones later, like years later, and then kind of had a more exact description. So some people point to that as like, oh, she changed. But I don't know. I mean, so that's out there. That's why I don't like leaning too hard in the bombs in the building, but it's out there.
It's not the strongest piece of evidence, but it's something people
I wouldn't be the least bit surprised.
Well, one strong thing I saw yesterday that there was people that check the earthquakes, what do they call that?
The seismography.
There was two explosives.
Yes,
10
they
seconds
saw two.
Apart.
The explanation from the feds was that I think that it rocked the building and then it caused it to kind of fall down and create a second.
Yeah, they didn't even deny that there was two. It came up. What was it? Yeah, it was something.
It was
weird.
like it rocked the building.
It rocked the building.
The concept was
10 seconds later. Yeah, it'd be boom, boom. If it was two, it wouldn't be 10 seconds. Yeah. Boom. 10 seconds is a long time, and then a second explosion that doesn't add up.
Yeah, the Fed's response to, I think I mentioned earlier, with Jesse Trentadue during one of his times with Crusades, he was given 30 surveillance tapes from the government, 30 different ones. Every single one of them had no tape prior to 9:02 a.m. So,
oh my God.
And their excuse, I said prior, keep that in mind. Their excuse, that one of the Fed excuses given was they had ran out of tape. How do you run out of tape in the past? Hilarious. Are you telling me that like multiple areas at the literally they were concerned about at the very moment of the largest terrorism event at that time in the United States? They were super concerned about restocking the tape in their surveillance camera. I don't know. I find that a little bit fishy.
Yeah, kind of like the two cameras that stopped working when Epstein decided to hang himself.
Yes. Which that comes into place with Jesse Trenadue's brother. His brother was in a high security area of a prison in the Oklahoma City federal transfer, and he died under extremely suspicious circumstances in the shoe. And the friggin' the surveillance tapes just disappeared there too. They went so far as they went to Norman Pearl, who was an expert videographer in the Rodney King case, and they contacted him and they go, hey, the FBI came to him and they go, hey, we want you to off the books, don't make a written record of this. We want your professional opinions or any way that this could have been something that was just, it's just an innocent error, like not done manually. And he came back and he goes, no. And he goes, he didn't give him a written court. Now, he didn't like how that played out. He came to Jesse Trentadue and told him about this. I mean, he did later die. I will say, to the many people who died here, this one is like he died of a heart attack. But if you do understand the Kenneth Trentadue story, there's like at least 4 other just around Kenneth, that like we can go into. So you have Norman Pearl. So I'll back up the Kenneth Trentadue. We have Kenneth Trentadue, who's Jesse Trendadue's brother. As I mentioned, he's the Jesse Trentadue is the lawyer. The lawyer who's like gotten so much. He's been an absolute hero. It's a long and storied thing. So we could do a whole podcast on just the ins and outs on Trenadue's legal case.
You have an in-depth one, right? You said like multiple hours for people that want to go super in-depth.
I have a whole...
Where can people find that?
I have the No Way Jose podcast. And now if you go to my podcast, especially on YouTube, you go to the playlist. I have I have lots of different series. But the series I've probably been the best known for was my Oklahoma City bombing series. Now I want to be very clear. That's no credit to myself. I've been lucky to surround myself with people who are more knowledgeable than I and to be able to read the right spots. For example, for this one, I had Richard Booth come on, who he is, I consider to be one of the foremost experts in the Oklahoma City bombing, among Wendy Painting and Jesse Trentadue, as I've mentioned as well. Now, he manages the largest public archive of the Oklahoma City bombing, which is hosted on the Libertarian Institute, which is Scott Horton's great website. It does a lot of great stuff for, against the feds, against the anti-war. I mean, absolute hero. And Scott's been a great voice in this as well.
I've seen a little bit of Scott's stuff. I don't know a lot about him, but I've liked what I've seen. I know he's been... outspoken with the Palestine and all that. So.
But yeah, so he's been the one who's managed it. He's kind of like one of those super into the details, the sources, and so I had him on, and we did about in the realm of like around 20 hours of Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah, so we're just doing a little. We're doing like a little touch up here. If people that want to go in depth, check that out.
Yeah, I've also interviewed.
I'm not one of those guys that has every little detail. So
I've also on that playlist. I've also interviewed the widow of Terrence Yeaky. I've also interviewed one of Terrence Yeaky's best friends, or at least claimed to be best friend. I mean, I'm not saying he's lying, but just obviously like that's what he says. So one of his friends, I don't have any reason to doubt him. I just want to be clear. I'm just trying to be clear when I make claims, so if we're like, oh, he's not his friend. I don't know. That's what he says.
He's lying.
I don't know. But anyway, so I've had them on. I've also had Ken Silva on, who's a great reporter. He's done a lot of great work on this. He'd be a great guy to have on if you ever do want to cover the pipeline that I referred to, like PACON, essentially the racist right, like kind of the infiltration of the feds into the right wing. That's been very undercovered, criminally undercovered in my opinion. We all know about, as we mentioned, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Black Panthers, all the infiltration that happened there, but for some reason just moot when it comes to everyone likes to believe, oh no, the right wing, there's a bunch of racists, there's a bunch of Nazis, Sieg Heil all over the place. Like, no, there's no inorganic anything to this at all.
Crazy, like that Whitmer kidnapping. That was all staged by feds, and some guys are still in prison for that. I think.
Radix Verum still there's still multiple people in prison. Yeah. I mean, Radix Verum's doing a great documentary on her. I would highly recommend her. She's awesome. Yep. I've had her on my show a bunch. She's worked with tons of people, but I mean, that's huge stuff. This is like why I think the Oklahoma City bombing matters. This has shaped our reality. I mean, I'm 33 years old.
They use this to get more control of the bombing.
There was an anti-terrorism bill.
That gets people worked up, and then they kind of like Patriot Act. There you go.
This was a precursor to the Patriot Act.
Was it pre-written? I bet it was probably pre-written, ready to get pushed through.
Yeah, they tried to push it through before the anti-terrorism bill, and it just so happened. I forget when they tried to push it through before, but then later after
by struck a good luck. Oh, we have this explosion. Now we need this bill passed. That's what they do. They have these mass shootings, these buildings going down, then they take a little more of a freedom away. Patriot Act. What's the act with what was the act of Oklahoma City bombing? What was it called?
The Anti-Terrorism Act. The Anti-Terrorism and Death Penalty Act, which also it's a fun little. It also weirdly expedited death penalty for specifically people who did specifically what he did, which is odd, like because it seems like a good way to get rid of the evidence.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we still have Terry Nichols out there though, but he's in I think he's in Terre Haute. He's in Super Max prison right now. He can't really talk to anyone.
Yeah, so without an FBI minder in the room.
He assisted the Terry Nichols.
Yes.
What was his role allegedly?
I don't know if you want to take that. You have a good little factoid we talked about in the car about Terry Nichols. So
I just think that honestly, when you look at first of all the fact that you have Jesse Trentadue who's like perfectly kind of putting into place, like he's so honestly strategically as an attorney. He's one of the most brilliant minds I've ever come across in my life, honestly, and so of course, he discussed PACON, by the way, and I think it's great to always utilize like his terminology occasionally when we get the opportunity, because he himself, again, as Jose has pointed out, perfectly, he's really the face of attempted public transparency, still on the forefront, right? The front lines
trying to
of
use
this
the
battle.
system, essentially. Because he's going through the legal system. A lot of people point to like, oh, look how successful we are. And I would actually point to this is actually a paragon of like how dysfunctional this system is. Because most of, obviously, I'm not going to try to go down the wormhole or the rabbit hole of Jesse Tran's legal stuff, but most of this was tied up in FOIA litigation. So you apply for FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act requests. I mean, this is the thing a lot of researchers do. You apply for, so theoretically, you're supposed to, when you ask for these, they're supposed to give it to you unless there's any legitimate reason, like there's still active informants out in the field or something along those lines, national security, whatever. Oh God, what was I even? I totally lost.
Well, basically for the Terry Nichols
Yes.
note, I mean, it's interesting because to this day, obviously, he insists the FBI was involved in the plot, right? So, I mean,
so he says that himself.
oh yeah, absolutely, and honestly, he's made a quite extraordinary statements revealing kind of at least implicating a strong government hidden hand as far as federal authorities being very much involved, obviously, with this operation and the green light of this Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building being the target of the bombing itself, but still, I mean, it's so crazy to actually have him saying these things, and then obviously, not only is he insisting the FBI is involved in the plot, but he also says that we'll never get to hear that story, obviously, because the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals overturned a judge's ruling in 2009 that would have allowed a Utah attorney named Jesse Trinidad to conduct a videotape deposition of Oklahoma City bombing conspirator Terry Nichols and death row inmate David Paul Hammer. Which that gets very strange, but
Who's David Paul
he was I don't know if he was technically
was
cellmate,
on
but he was
death row.
he was on death row with McVeigh.
With McVeigh,
and now
yeah.
he claims. Now I guess this kind of gets into where things get really juicy.
Wait, they wouldn't let them. I'm a little confused. They wouldn't let.
Yeah, I'll
them
finish this
be
part.
interviewed?
It's super
Or I was
crazy
just trying
because
to-
this is the point, basically, is that the story goes that the only people that are allowed to visit Terry Nichols in federal lockup in Florence, Colorado, which houses Ramsey Youssef and like all these usual suspects of like potential
Ted K there, I think, at the
Ted
same time he was
Kaczynski,
there.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
who are obvious.
That's another
you know,
interesting-
yeah, they're obviously.
Ted K had some funny statements about McVeigh,
man.
about like what he, how he perceived him, and
Yeah.
I think McVeigh did too. So like I forget
did,
the specifics of it, but
Yeah, I did a Ted Kaczynski episode, which, by the way, I don't think I ever mentioned. My podcast is the Underclass Podcast, and I definitely on one of my solo episodes early on, I covered Ted Kaczynski and obviously the Harvard MK Ultra experiments that were
this is
going
a
on.
whole this is a rabbit hole. Another time I know
We
'cause I'm
won't go
fascinated with
into
this too.
that.
But no,
Yeah.
real quick, so they weren't. Basically, no one can access.
This was so brilliant what Jesse did here, and even then, it goes to show the level of control that the federal authorities have over this case.
he
honestly.
became his lawyer so that we would get lawyer
Right,
lawyer
so
privilege essentially.
That was how he was
Basically,
able
he
to talk to him.
provided
Yeah,
They
him-
weren't letting him talk to him otherwise. That's
no.
crazy.
So he
if
did that.
he hadn't made the brilliant, at least he hadn't attempted to give Terry Nichols legal advice before he was actually put into actually convicted and everything, then that is what gave him the ability to actually go and visit him in
They
this
don't
tape.
allow him to talk to like media.
But
or anything?
even then, it gets
That's
even
how these
crazier.
work.
This
They-
is
they-
like,
that's
I didn't know
actually-
that was legal. That's
No,
insane.
it's legit. Like you would
Yeah.
look into these, they do really get into a very gray constitutional area because not only is it hard for people to get into to get like say it would be amazing if we could get anyone to
We could
talk
talk to these
to
people,
Terry
yeah.
Nichols.
Like, I would like
like
to
this
talk
guy
to- I
has
would love
like
to go
he
interview
knows
these
who
people.
John Doe 2
Exactly.
is. He said he knows who John Doe 2 is, but
And the
he
head
won't
of the
reveal
FBI
it.
investigation said there is a John Doe too.
Yeah, and he's
so
literally
it's
said he would be willing to do it, but he's concerned about his family's safety.
Family safety.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll go after your families
Yes,
too.
they
That's
will.
what's
There was
scary, you know?
we were talking on the way over here. There was the was it the Mueller murders? It was the Mueller, William Mueller and his entire family, his young daughter and kid. They were killed by the Kehoe brothers, which do have kind of a tie-in into this. I mean, this is this is such a big thing to put up. But anyway, just kind of take my word and go check out my series if you want to.
Yeah.
But this guy looked like it was tied into this, kind of a shut up type thing.
Yeah.
There was shortly before that guy had been robbed by some people, and he seemed to think it was, I believe, Michael Brescia and Andreas Strassmeyer. Which Andreas Strassmeyer is a fun little jump. Andreas Strassmeyer and Roger Moore are two individuals we can go into if you want to get a CIA
They glow
connection.
like the sun, basically.
Yeah, they
is
glow
what
like
it-
the sun.
Yeah, let's go real quick. So who are they now?
All right, Andreas Strassmeyer is
amazing
probably the
stuff.
easiest one to break down because if anything, Roger Moore glows so hard, it's hard to do justice to like breaking it down. Because you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about the Iran-Contra connections. Oh yeah, I forgot about the Cuba connections. Oh yeah, I forgot about the
Iran-Contra, that's interesting because we're going to do that later. Another subject we're doing, all the connections.
Yeah. So we have all right, Strassmeyer is probably the easiest one. Now he was in the German military. He was a German national. He did military intel
intelligence.
stuff for a while.
Yeah.
He actually was. This we get back to the Jays.
Uh-oh.
He was actually on a kibbutz for a while and looked like he was doing something along the lines of maybe like cross training with the IDF or Mossad or IDF. Actually,
It's confusing.
Whatever. Essentially, he was helping kind of do security. But like from the outside looking in, this kind of looks like some sort of joint thing. Obviously, you got to keep in mind what's going on in Germany at that time. What was their big concern? They were still in their big denazification push in post like World War. I mean, we're in the 90s, like in the 80s still, but still that was a big part. I mean, hell, it's still illegal to like
question the Holocaust. I think those are the years they started pushing it, started making the movies about it, started making it illegal.
So I mean, it's like then we have Andreas Strassmeyer come over from a military intel guy. Bearing in mind, German military or German intel was known for being very anti-denazi, and now he comes over to the States. Initially, he comes over to. Comes with this guy named Vincent Petruski, who was former CIA, likely in the Operation Phoenix program, which was essentially like kill squads in Vietnam, like deep glowy stuff.
Yep.
And he supposedly was working to get Andreas Strassmeyer a federal job, and then it just fell through. It just fell through, and instead of whatever, it just fell through. It didn't work out. We didn't get that federal job. And then Strassmeyer then goes and moves from Vincent Petruski and goes over to San Saba, Texas to go stay with Dave Holloway, who's a former CIA pilot. Former, obviously, in quotes. Now this guy, they're at Texas Light Infantry, which is a militia in San Saba. The rumor goes that supposedly Andreas Strassmeyer got kicked out of that militia because he got seen trying to enter a federal building that had a keypad. Yep. Which obviously would be like if you have the password, like let's be real, like I don't know, something's going on here.
Dude, wasn't it members of the TLI who were like super paranoid considering they trailed him one night
that was
after hours and they saw him entering a federal building by keycard entry and they're like, what the fuck? We gotta kick this dude out. He's a Fed.
And then from there then he goes over to Elohim City, which was I believe over in Oklahoma, not too far away from the Oklahoma City bombing.
Oklahoma City? Is that where
McVeigh
was at?
It's where McVeigh is heavily implied to be at. Now this is where as I mentioned John Doe 2 earlier. I'm of the belief it was John Doe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, et cetera, et cetera, et
Bunch
cetera.
of them, yeah.
Yeah, so like John Doe.
That seems likely.
Yeah, but now when we say John Doe 2, if you are being specific, especially if you are a researcher, you may mean specifically the guy in the Ryder truck. Yeah. But now what's not as reported on as much is there was a literal caravan that seemed to be going through Oklahoma with this group. Yep. So I think there was a lot more to it than just
there's lots
that.
of reports of that and stuff as well.
Yeah, there's eyewitnesses. You can check out my series. Richard Booth does a much better job of breaking down the specifics, all sources, everything, like just going into that.
Was McVeigh part of any militias or anything? Or
well, that's the thing. Well, no, okay, now let's go into, I guess let's back up to the background of McVeigh.
Yeah, let's go through McVeigh exactly, because I don't know McVeigh's history. What's the official story?
Now, he was a Gulf War veteran. He was a Gulf War veteran. He went overseas. He, he fought. He killed what they called crunchies in his Bradley vehicle, where they ran over Iraqis, buried them underground.
Can I reinforce the point you're about to make with a term that we should? I think this is the best way to kind of view this as far as just like the scope of what could potentially be possible, at least with McVeigh specifically, because even L. Fletcher Prouty, right, who was the X character in the JFK movie, Oliver Stone's JFK movie, that super famous monologue that he does where he's revealing, the intelligence connections, obviously how they triangulated the rifle fire in Dallas that day, but still he also had an interesting take on Jonestown, but then OKC, and so. This is crazy because this is the first time Tim McVeigh was my introduction to this term, which was sheep-dipped. I didn't quite understand what that term was until I was exposed to the story. And so this is, of course, Colonel in the U.S. Air Force and Chief of Special Operations for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That was L. Fletcher Prouty. And he worked from 1955 to 64 as a liaison, procuring military supplies, equipment, logistics, support for CIA Special Operations worldwide. So in 73, he writes a tell-all, The Secret Team. Prouty discusses the inner workings of America's intelligence community, and he says sheep-dipped is an intricate Army-devised process by which a man who is in the service as a full career soldier or officer agrees to go through all the legal and official motions of resigning from the service. Then, rather than actually being released, his records are pulled from the Army personnel files and transferred to a special Army intelligence file. So, substitute, but nonetheless, real appearing records are then processed, and the man leaves the service. He's encouraged to write to friends and give a cover reason why he got out. He goes to his bank and charge card services and changes his status to civilian and does the hundreds of other official and personal things that any man would do if he really had gotten out of the service. Meanwhile, his real Army records are kept in secrecy, but not forgotten. And that's essentially just like the perfect way to stage.
No, I hadn't quite gotten
He's
there.
still basically working for them.
We'll get there because we got a little bit of ourselves. But as I said, he was in the military.
Yeah.
Now the key thing is he went over to Desert Storm. He partook in the hostilities over there. And I think from my reading of the account, particularly in like this book with Wendy Painting, she goes really good into his time in between. In the military, after the military, before the bombing, she goes really good into the specifics of that. Now McVeigh. Dang it, so why am I so spacey? What was that?
You're probably just trying to trace back the intelligence connections to his.
Okay, yeah. He went to war. What I was getting at is him being disillusioned with war. There are a lot of statements and things that lead me to believe he did get disillusioned with war. So whether I don't know what came of him after the fact, but now when he came back from war, he had wanted to go to the Special Forces. So he went to the Special Forces, and this is official narrative. There's no one's questioning that he went to the Special Forces. Now he went to Special Forces. He died. He dropped out shortly after, within a few days, supposedly due to bad some sort of ankle or knee or some sort of minor injury. Which I will say, I did time in the military, so I know like rucking and stuff like that. So like I understand how like a minor injury from being like overseas in a deployed area, how like that could really actually affect your performance. So it's not that crazy. In something that sort of high performance environment, that really could be something that could really screw you over. But either way, now the official narrative is he dropped out. Now this comes to, obviously, when it comes to this, really the only sources we have are McVeigh. So take this as far as you want to go with it.
It's crazy though.
But he told his first public defenders this. He also told his mom and his sister, and likely his grandpa who died, because there was like a story about like I'm having a mental breakdown and telling his sister about that.
New York Times article.
But the New York Times article. But anyways, the most commonly point to thing is the letter to his sister, where he said that like they, essentially what happened is they took him aside. They read off a few social security numbers of a few people, and they said, hey, you guys come with us, and go, hey, we want to offer you an opportunity to go do this, where you're going to be doing kind of, drug interdiction, taking care of whatever problem we have, just kind of off the books operations. And essentially you will go. Now, it is interesting that that's when he does, then it also lines up with, he's saying this, I believe it's in 92 or 93 when this letter goes to his sister. So it's years before the bombing. So I'm like, I guess he could be a compulsive liar. I don't like,
but yeah, it seems like a good chance it's real.
It seems crazy enough, but like he's doing it. He's telling his sister, he's telling his first public defenders this as well. They're like, hey, as part, and then what does he do when he comes back to the States, when he gets out of the government or gets out of the military? Well, he goes to the Guard, which I do find that interesting, as I was mentioning the joint task force nature of this earlier. Now, the Guard is in a different legal status where they're able to be. They're a domestic entity, technically. Now, we do use them in war, but that's when they get activated by the government. But technically, they reside to the individual states. So this is where they have more legal sweeping. It kind of gives you more cover, legally speaking. Yeah. So he did go to the Guard for a while. During that time, he was also working for either Caltech or CalSpan. I always forget which one it is. But so some glowy, super, So it is weird, but then right around that time, then he leaves that and just kind of goes on a trek across the states, all over the place, and just seems like he's almost doing like doing the greatest hits of all the racists around the world, essentially. Like the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, just all these different type of people he was hanging out at these events. He was being seen with. He was seen at Waco. There's literal video of him at Waco. He
was going to all these different
places.
So
he was making. It would seem, for those who would maybe be a little skeptical of the situation, someone making a legend for oneself, kind of like, oh, here's this disillusion.
He wanted to make connections between all these people was another scenario. He wanted to tie in so they could tie him into all these different people.
It's like Lee Harvey Oswald working for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, going down to the block past 554 or 544.
So they're like
Camp
leaving
Street,
this trail.
and he's getting photographed in front of the federal building, passing out leaflets
for
the Fair Play for Cuba
very
Committee,
deliberately almost,
which has the address on the leaflets of 544 Camp Street, which was where the actual nexus of the intelligence.
And then you remember that drop car I mentioned earlier? Take into account the drop car propaganda in the car. That as well, like being at Waco.
What do you have in the car with him? Yeah,
well, I forget the specific. I think they have the Turner Diaries in there, which is like a well-known, like kind of like racist, like literature kind of deal, which is kind of like in that. Literally, there was the person bombed a federal building in that thing, so that's like the penultimate moment of the book.
They want to leave it like it's so obvious. Here's a good one. I had Ryan Dawson came on and broke down the RFK assassination, and it's
God.
like, well, first up, they say it was the gun held 8 bullets, fired 13 shots, so
Yeah.
it's
Right.
impossible.
It happens.
I'm not gonna get into the thing, but
being silly, I'm being
there's so many things that are crazy. But here's a funny one. I think it's Sarhan, if I'm saying his name
Yeah,
right.
Sarhan,
He
yeah.
had he had a newspaper article with him of like on the Palestine conflict. Like, are you really just gonna carry that with you
Yep.
because he's Palestinian? It's like,
It's exactly
come on.
what they tried to frame it as. RFK had just basically signed off on bombers being sent to Israel, so therefore here's the motivating factor. And in reality, it was Thane Eugene
The
Cesar.
guy was mob tied. He owed a bunch of money.
Dude,
He was-
Rosicrucian as well, which there's a direct connection to a secret fraternal organization of powerful influence, obviously, and but yeah, it's very interesting that entire
It's like,
story.
the same we're talking. I'm just seeing so many connections. I've been recently going to the rabbit holes. There's just so many connections. To these
See
other
what I was
stories,
like,
you know?
oh, man, we got hours to
you,
go
you,
on here.
you have the book on you. You know, it's like, exactly. It's like you go forever. But
Yeah.
we're hitting 2 right now. So wait. It's,
It's over. Let's see where I tell
Right.
you, Audrey, like, hey, what should I dig into first? I was like, nothing.
Yeah,
Because
we'll
you're
go.
like, whoa.
I do want to go in the Unabomber too. Not today, but that's
Oh,
one I
man.
want to dig down because that's
Yeah.
another one. They're
Dude,
doing
reading
mind
the
control stuff
Unabomber
on 'em and-
manifesto, it's like
Pretty wild.
almost a prophecy.
No,
it's
yeah,
like
everyone
he's
should,
predicting the
everyone
future.
should go read that. You know,
It's amazing
I'm not trying to
stuff.
say he's a good guy
Yeah.
or anything, but you
No.
should read the manifesto.
I
Absolutely.
don't agree with political
Agreed.
violence at all. I mean, to be very clear.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know. He had some other good thoughts.
Yeah, it was like, wow, when I read that. It's
Yeah.
like, you're like, that's interesting.
Yeah. I prioritized it and actually put it at the end of my Ted K episode. But
You know that, well, sure, you know if you've done it, they were doing studies on him when he was in high school or college or whatever,
yeah.
like these weird like mind
they'd
control studies.
separate him from his mother. There was this crazy brother.
No, I'm just thinking. I'm like, we're talking MK Ultra. I got. All right,
That's
go
what
on.
it is.
Keep
Trauma-based
going.
mind control, basically, right? Is really what you're dealing with. But yeah, so I think that this was very much from its infancy. Like this was the approach. I think a lot of these, but we won't go into it. But there's a lot of
Infiltration
there's a lot of
is
Nazi
100% real.
Yeah.
People know they were attempting to, mind control. They
I'm
were
about to blow your
torturing
mind
people.
again.
They
Oh,
were
brother.
drugging them. Powerful people. The guy Jolly West had said
Oh, God.
said he had been changing memories. We don't know if he had or not,
Oh,
but he
man.
was involved with Jack
The
Rubenstein.
psychic driving technique was perfectly sophisticated and advanced over the Montreal experiments. Dr. Ewan Cameron, he was specifically kind of the CIA's asset in Canada, who was running these MK Ultra experiments on Canadian civilians as well,
Yeah.
and using public
Drugs,
institutions.
torture.
Yeah, the Oak Ridge facility and the Psychopath Machine is a great example of that. But again, you can kind of like you can tie this in. There's so many. Like we were just discussing
Because it
how
is all connected. It's the same
Yes.
group, maybe several different groups of power structures, but there's several groups
you
running
get
this all
into the
together.
mind control techniques and MK Ultra specifically itself, Project Monarch, and you get into essentially how they manufacture basically what it's called MDD or multiple personality disorder (MPD), and then also
Let's get
dissociative
more into that in
identity
the next
disorder.
episode. I have some I've been waiting to drop
Yeah,
off.
I
okay,
think
you're good.
MK
Go
Ultra,
ahead.
it is such an interesting topic, and it is partial. At least part of it's real. They deleted all the records,
And it
other than some
connects
financial
to the
records, but
Oklahoma
it's
City
100%.
Yep, we're about to. All right, let's just start off with what this is actually. There's starting off. He had a psychologist on his defense team, John Smith. And this guy was a pupil of Jolyon West. Now, if that wasn't bad enough,
Wait. He had his defense team. He had people.
he had a psychologist that basically had borderline unfettered access to him, who was a pupil of Jolly West.
And Jolly West, he always demanded to meet all these people.
Jolly
after-
West
Oh,
met with
yeah.
McVeigh as well.
Yep.
Now, I will
Wow.
say,
Oh,
I
I didn't
forget
know
the
this.
specifics and the source on this. This will likely be in Wendy's next upcoming book whenever that comes out, which I'm sure will be great because she did amazing, phenomenal work in this. But I do remember she actually covered it in a podcast series on Program to Chill. She did her own series there too. I would highly recommend it. I will admit that it's a little bit more of a lefty analysis.
Yeah, that's all right.
So,
We
but
can-
I think it gives
Real
you a better,
quick, though,
clearer
Jolly
view.
West is one of the top people
Yeah.
in MK Ultra, like probably the number 2 guy. He was the one that people think he was involved with Manson. They're not
he definitely
correct
Ruby,
for
yeah,
sure, but
Jack
Ruby
Ruby.
for sure. 100.
Yeah.
He demanded that he see. The judge kept like, no, you can't see him because he kept wanting to see Ruby. Eventually, he weaseled his way somehow, and then after that he got all like weird.
And it's
wagged
official
out.
narrative
Oh,
that
God.
he was.
That's official
yeah.
that he was that he.
And it was official narrative. I mean, it's not official narrative they met with McVeigh, but it is official narrative that he was actually working during that time to help with trauma victims of the bombing.
Yeah, he's
which is a little bit
he's
disturbing
tied in
when you
with
understand what he
all
does.
These weird things.
Yeah.
That guy was tight. You see
Yeah, you're like,
connections
oh,
to him
he's handling
everywhere.
these sensitive, distraught people that just experience this awful event. I don't know. It might be an easy time to kind of distort some information. You know what I mean? So he was. If you do read a lot of this, you do kind of see him pop up occasionally in the narrative and kind of like, oh, this witness claims they had a meeting from him or that, and you're like, kind of like you do see him pop up at weird times. And you're like, what the hell?
Dude.
So it does almost seems like he's kind of he's almost playing the manipulation game in there.
Definitely.
Exactly.
There's people should look this guy up. They don't know. There's a lot. It's a crazy rabbit hole. MK Ultra, Jolly West, like the
and Jolly West was running the.
He seemed like one of the top. Ones for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic is.
He was doing that too, right? Yeah. So they were drugging people. Imagine getting out here to an LSD. Imagine if you got tripped in LSD and you didn't know you were doing it. He would do that when they're hookers and they'd be watching them through the other room.
Yeah. Operation Midnight
Climax. A couple of them might have like killed themselves or died. There's been all kinds of like wicked crazy stuff there.
And then they utilize a lot of these, like again, Jose mentioned layered operation. It's like it's never just one priority. Like they're achieving multiple benchmarks.
Always, multiple things at once.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what's the guy that killed the 60s, the Manson? Yeah. He was using the same tactics, like getting heavily drugged, going through these experiments. So he was using very similar tactics as some of the stuff Jolly West was trying.
When he was
and he was in the same like clinics he was going through that he was at. Oh yeah, like, hanging
he was
out
in
with
Vauqueville, the institution up north where Donald Cinque DeFries was actually they conducted mind control experiments on him and utilizing the California prison complex. And essentially what happened at Vauqueville is there was a pipeline set up from Vauqueville as a penitentiary institution to Berkeley, UC Berkeley. And that was set up by Colston Westbrook, the Phoenix operative, right, who had very much a deep connection into Jonestown.
Like the sun.
Yeah, had a huge connection to Jonestown. And by the way,
he was tied in with that too.
He set up the pipeline. He's brought back.
He was tied in with kind of the M culture.
He's brought back from Phoenix and Vietnam for domestic operations, and he goes and poses as an actual professor at UC Berkeley.
So he wasn't really a professor.
And he sets up a pipeline to the local the local institution that they're utilizing as an MK Ultra vessel, right?
He was finding people to feed there. They get kids that were young, college,
by the way,
getting them on drugs.
100%. And guess who showed up in the pipeline and was visiting Donald Cinque DeFries at least months prior to the abduction? Patty Hearst.
Oh, Jesus, that's
who
a different
Jolly
one.
West was also involved in her criminal trial.
God,
and then there's a Green Beret through line through all of this with Timothy McVeigh.
So he was also allegedly, brainwashed to go do all these crimes for one of these terrorist organizations. It's just like
put her in a closet with a script, and it was all like the same tactics they utilized.
I didn't know these same people were involved. It makes sense because again, she was brainwashed to go join that organization, and that's
SLA.
why it was
which was just like the ARA and the Oklahoma City
bombing.
I
didn't even mention when we were getting to Strassmeyer going to Elohim City, there was a group there. This is kind of like a racist right-wing compound, whatever you want to call it. People might characterize it differently, but whatever. That's kind of what it was.
It's really racist. Maybe it really was.
I don't know. But Strassmeyer was there. That's the next place he ended up with after this, going through this round of Petruski, former CIA agent, to Holloway, former CIA agent, and now he ends up in Elohim City. And Elohim City is this area with all this. His roommate is this guy named Michael Brescia there.
White supremacist compound.
It's a white supremacist compound, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So that's where they're at. So we have this. We have the ARA there. Now there was a group of people that are also called the ARA that kind of were known for sort of setting up their base of operations might be putting it too strongly, but kind of place they were known to be in and out of. It's second home, if you will, or maybe even a first home, is this group called the ARA, which they did get busted later after. It was actually an FBI operation called Operation Bomb Rob, which these guys, Michael Brescia, Kevin McCarthy, Peter Langan, Richard Guthrie, there's these group of guys who were part of the ARA, the Aryan Republican Army.
Yep.
Now, there's heavily implications that McVeigh was likely tied in with these. For one, as I mentioned, we were talking about Strassmeyer earlier. Now, McVeigh has multiple connections with him. Now, there's only one meeting that Strassmeyer ever copped up to meeting with McVeigh. Now, what he said is that he met with him at a gun show. They traded a couple things. He got his ABUs from McVeigh, and literally in one of his interviews, you can actually see McVeigh's Desert Storm, not ABUs, BDUs, I forget which acronym it is, but his military uniform, his fatigues, were hanging
like
up in his closet, like a trophy. But that's the one time he ever met him. Supposedly he gave him a business card to contact him at Elohim City. McVeigh actually called him the day, or called Holloway actually, which is another person at that time, the day before, and actually he did try to get a hold of Strassmeyer Elohim as well. So I mean, he had to essentially, it seems like, come up with a cover story for why is McVeigh trying to contact you, not long before the bombing. It's like, I don't know, I gave him his card once and we met once in a gun show. But there's multiple other people who claim they've seen him elsewhere, much like John Matthews, right. As I mentioned earlier, the FBI PACON operative. He claims he saw them together. He also, to bring it back to the ARA, that group, of people. He in an email with his PatCon handler. So we have John Matthews, a former PatCon operative, and John God, what did I say his name is? Don Jarrett. Yeah. Don Jarrett, the PatCon handler, talking. An actual confirmed actual PatCon handler. And there's literally an email that it's out there. You can probably find it at the Libertarian Institute archive, but in there it's basically John Matthews saying to him essentially, "Hey, we're." You remember that group VMA, this other movement? He's like, I remember them being like a front group for us, right? Because that's what these guys were doing. They're infiltrating movements. Like, this is a front group for us. He's like, what about the ARA? You remember them? Were they? I vaguely. He says something along the lines like, I kind of recall that being good. And then Don Jarrett in that email exchange confirms, yes, they were. Now, I will say I've read a whole book on it. In Bad Company is a great book on specifically into the ARA and like how that may or may not connect. The theory of multiple John Doe 2s. But like I highly recommend that book. I totally.
I know, dude. All I'm saying is that I had mentioned earlier, just as far as like defining what PatCon was, right, and mentioning Jesse Trinaduce just as a key, just as far as the key to Spotlight in terms of.
Wait, which one was Jesse?
He was the Utah attorney who
was talking to
whose brother was also actually a murdered and a mistaken identity for John Doe 2.
Which we probably need to circle back to that at some point. That story's nuts. There's like 4 other deaths just in his death. It's so convoluted.
So that's
it's a very
crazy.
difficult thing.
He's the one that's getting all the information from McVeigh. McVeigh says basically FBI's in on it.
It's
not
Terry
McVeigh,
Nichols. Terry Nichols, yeah. And it's crazy because essentially when he exposed what PatCon really was, he was pursuing it for, well over like 16, 17 years at the time that he was like, essentially, he was called.
It's fairly recently.
Yeah.
Not too long ago.
Yeah, exactly. And he says he gets a call, right? And basically, he explains that this was obviously PatCon, an acronym for Patriot Conspiracy. But he says that the FBI began to distance itself from PatCon when he was probing it. And they said it was just a simple operation where they were going to infiltrate some militia folks in Alabama who had stolen some night vision goggles from a military base and were selling them. But it was clear to him that PatCon was bigger than
Operation
that.
Punch Out is what
That's
that is.
exactly what that is. So obviously he believes that it was much bigger than this, and he says that PatCon operations were going on all over the country at the time. So this is, widespread domestic operations, being conducted by intelligence.
Infiltrating all these different organizations,
100%.
which they're 100% doing today, but they don't. They don't do the same with Antifa and stuff. You guys know that, but all the right-wing groups.
I actually beg to disagree. There's a lot of stories out there. For example, in the Whitmer kidnapping, there was one of the characters named Red, who was like a bombing guy. Well, I think he was later in another Antifa bus or something. He was.
It never seems to like directly get them. I could be wrong, but it seems like they always really, really try to infiltrate all the right wing groups.
Yeah, they're definitely. I think it's just undercover.
I think honestly.
But the government's trying to do crimes with the right for some reason, it seems like.
Yes, that's the angle in my opinion right now, for sure.
Ideological subversion to honestly, it's kind of reinforcing that two-party paradigm to such an extent.
Yeah, because I'm not a two-party guy, that's why I don't understand why. But just looking out, it looks like from perspective, I could be wrong, but it looks like they go after the right-wing groups, try to infiltrate those more. A good example, like, they didn't go after the Black Lives Matter riots, but they went. The biggest investigation of all time was the January 6th. Wasn't that bad. The other one, how many 20, 30 people died in the BLM riots?
Oh man, you're 100% right though. There's definitely, I would say, maybe there's a potential for more violence being,
more militias on the right, maybe, or something.
Yeah,
and they're not. They don't really take the. I think they use like the Antifa kind of as their go and riot. Like almost they use them as their useful idiots.
The culture tool, maybe to some degree, to kind of like help continually.
I think to some extent the right's like the sleeping giant too. That you're like,
because there could be a real threat.
I mean, as cliche as it might be, like they're the ones with jobs. Like they're the ones with. They're the ones that are usually like, I don't know, more like blue collar type workers, guys that like, I don't know, don't take none type deal, but they actually have real lives. But once you upset that group, I think that's when really you might actually see some changes. Have
principle and backbone and actually go and do something.
Or actually enact some changes as opposed to just go ride in the streets.
That's a great point actually, because like what is it truly targeting? It's almost like in a certain way, it's undermining the core principles of an entire movement, right? Where it's like, what really does, you would think the real philosophy and core root principles in regard to their ideology, as far as just more of the conservative ideological framework, you're dealing with principles that are very much intact, that believe in family values and are actually pursuing some sort of they're just inherently more as far as like they're more in the framework of actually attempting to exercise their constitutional rights, and so that alone is a threat to the state. And so I believe that, of course,
crazy, but it's true.
It is.
It's
Right?
so wild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, the January 6th was such a big deal to me. I thought because it's just the amount of agents came in and the investigation, people going to prison for nothing.
feds
I actually,
there too, yeah.
I flew through Washington D.C. on that day, flying back from Morocco, and I was kind of joking, like, "Oh, maybe we get off, my friend. Should we get off and?" Should we get off the plane? We were like, literally think about it for a second, but we were kind of tired and we flew back home. Our dumbasses might have walked right through the building like they were walking people in. You know, I could have been in jail for a couple of years just for like
There's a guided
walking through
tour for a lot of these guys. I mean, sure, there were some people that were causing problems here and there that you can highlight, but for the most part, like, let's
it
be
looked
real.
fun.
It's
She
a
the guy
guided
that was
tour.
holding the podium,
right.
and there was the guy that was dressed up like a shaman.
Dude, I was so
hated-
hyped.
Oh, me
It
too.
was
You know,
fun.
I never pretend like it was a big deal.
Yeah, I knew it was a bad idea, but I was like, it was fun.
Bad idea, but most of these right wing people they condemned it for a year.
Yeah.
It wasn't until it became trendy.
Yeah, because they finally did something. Like,
It shows
oh no,
these people are fake and full of shit
Yeah.
too, because they went along with, oh, this was the worst thing ever. The right was saying it too, not as bad as the left, but they were
So
going
gay.
along with it. They weren't fighting that hard against the rest.
totally
You're like,
right.
wow, these people on the right are also our enemy. A lot of them.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think we're really seeing now the influencer game going on. I mean, I'm not going to call out any names right now, but there
I
are
will.
definitely a lot of people that are like. I mean, I was just speaking generally, just because it wasn't even one that came to mind. It's my point. It's just that it's kind of generally speaking, we're seeing these influencer games are happening. You could just see they're like, oh, I see the strings here.
Oh, yeah.
Like I know what's going on.
I know you don't, but Tim Pool said he got invited to a secret meeting. He only leaked it. He's not allowed to legally say who else was there with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, I struggle to find a good faith interpretation of that.
That's insane. I can't believe that Tim Pool actually said that.
Yeah,
Do you
it's
not
like
realize,
you
do you not
either
realize that
are-
he was leaking out? It's
Under
like
Chatham House rules.
It struggles as
well.
corrupt or stupid. That's what strikes me as.
he can't say who else there.
Absolutely.
Imagine what so many
Yeah.
influencers probably there, and these guys, and for sure they're finding ways to pay him, maybe different ways, kickbacks. Oh, we'll pay you for this.
You're
There's all
100%
kinds of ways
Yeah.
around it.
That is the playbook of modern Mockingbird. It's oversaturating the alternative media landscape to such an extent to where you see the death of the mainstream media playing out before our eyes. All the kind of average milquetoast individuals who are not quite waking up or a little bit behind the curve when it comes to kind of like just acknowledging like the real power paradigm that we exist in. I mean, they are essentially fleeing that dying gasp, that last gasp of the MSM, and now they're being deliberately corralled back into the establishment narrative, but in a way where they think that they're actually getting the truth now, which is just like a huge misnomer.
it's like
We are the
it's-
media now, and all the same.
It's
tweets.
like Netanyahu calling himself the deep, or calling his opponents, his political opponents, the deep state for him being involved with Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, they do things-
I'm against the deep state.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, they do things too, like, you know, me. They use people like me as an example. They didn't ban me, which I'm thankful for, but
Yeah.
they took away my check marks. They took away my monetization. They did it to
They
like
pulled
all
Spotify episodes. I've never heard of that.
They've taken 4 or 5
Aside from Rogan, but that was like an
down.
agreement thing with them.
Yeah, I think he took them down himself. He
Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
But like how they target my money and stuff, so they make other guys be, oh, if you're on the right, you're gonna lose your verification. And verification was even bigger deal than the money to me. Obviously, I'd rather have the money, but it's kind of it's like, oh, this guy doesn't get the same, and it hurts your engagement. I can't write more than 180 character tweets now. Like it's like, I can't put an informative tweet together anymore. You
Oh, it
can't
makes a
really-
big difference. Those tools are helpful.
Like all my best tweets are like, you know, you need like 6 lines. You do like 3 lines with what you have with a regular tweet. So you can't really pack much information into like, so it's like, they're like, oh, this is a punishment. And they did it openly so everyone could see like this guy is being punished because he has the wrong opinions on the right. They went
That's
after,
exactly
it was
what
all
it is.
people on the right that were like not big on Israel, the people that think a little different, that weren't jumping the narrative. So they wanted to make an example of us. And I've had a lot of these big MAGA accounts be like, oh, I agree with you on Israel and stuff, but I can't say anything. And I'm just like, Sheriff, I'm not calling anyone out. But like, you're a fucking coward.
Exactly.
I mean, mark my words, the next move here is going to be targeting probably maybe security clearances. You no longer be applicable for security clearances if you oppose Israel,
No,
and then
I
it's going to be
I could potentially have to flee the
as-
country. You know,
yeah.
I'm keeping. You know, I should switch
And
more
then
money to
First Amendment there
Bitcoin.
too,
You know, my
yeah.
banks could get shut down. Like, I'm realistically looking like, oh, I might have to get out of America. That could happen one
Yeah,
day.
we're
and
just
it
gonna see
could-
an
it could
version of the
happen quick,
COVID
too.
shit. And it's just like,
What
oh, but now
happens,
it's
it could
COVID
be
for
quick.
Jews.
yeah, exactly.
What the hell is
Anti-Semitism is
this?
the worst problem
Yeah.
America's facing. But
Yeah.
they never. I don't want any laws, but they never did
It's
any
a silent
special
killer.
laws. Well, 30 year, they were bashing white people, which I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I don't
Yeah,
want any
whatever.
special laws. But they never had
Yeah.
those. That's most of the country. free, you know.
No,
And
I'd
it's like,
say it was gay if you gave me special laws. Like I don't want
Yeah,
that.
exactly, dude.
Don't give me a white day. I don't like. What, I don't care.
like all groups should have the
Yeah.
exact same rules. That's why hate crimes and hate speech. It's all ridiculous. Who determines that?
Yeah, I enjoy hate speech. It's fun. So
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. we all like to fuck around and joke. Like I know you guys do Top Lobster. He's a maniac.
yeah, Top
Wow,
Lobster's a
great,
jam. I've
dude.
been doing a regular comedy show with him since basically he started podcasting.
Yeah,
we
he's
do an
so
offensive
funny.
comedy show called Tower Gang every Wednesday. For those who are into that, so it's offensive. Let me emphasize that. But I think your crew is
Oh,
probably.
I
okay
think my
with it.
audience, I think my audience would be okay with it. Yeah, no,
Yeah, I've heard a couple times about Tim Pool. It had some people that were coming into the comments like, "What in the hell is this?"
of course.
We go hard, homeboy.
Yeah, no, he's funny. When's the Matt comes that comedy? When's he doing that comedy?
Who's that?
The guy he's having, is it Top Lobster doing the comedy thing?
Oh yes, we have
Bohemian
Bohemian
Grove.
Grove.
Bohemian
Boom.
Put it on the camera.
Yeah,
I might
bro-
go to that, especially if I can get Sam and
Yeah.
Owen
It's
to
in
come on.
Leesburg,
And,
Florida. At we got like essentially a whole like strip you're shut down with restaurants and stuff. There's a theater that we're overtaking. We have Sam Tripoli, Owen Benjamin coming. This is June 20th and June 21st.
Owen isn't now, huh?
Yeah, no, they're both in. They're doing separate days. I don't know. But I'm not getting into that. I'm not doing the drama thing, but they're going separate
I'm
days.
gonna they're gonna make him fight or be friends. You guys
Yeah,
gotta fight
I mean,
or
you
be
should
friends.
come. You force him. I'm not gonna. Hey, that guy's a Nephilim. Oh, Owen, I ain't
Yeah,
touching him. I ain't putting hands on him.
Oh yeah. He tried wrestling me up.
Yeah, I think I could take Sam, but I ain't touching Owen.
Oh my god.
Me and Owen
I
wrestled.
love him, but
No, I was in Idaho wrestling with his kids, and Owen tried coming at me. And I'm like, "Oh, bro, you're gonna get fucked up." He was just like, "Shit, that didn't go as well as I thought." Threw him on the ground.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I was teaching his kids how to choke him.
Yeah.
Oh, bro, I taught his like 9-year-old a nasty choke though. Owen's gonna get choked out one of these days. soon.
I will
He's
say
not
from
paying
years of wrestling as
attention.
a kid, it was always fun when you get like a goofy large person that's uncoordinated.
Yeah.
Like if you do know what you're doing, it's always just fun to play with them.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I taught Owen's kid to choke, and then I wasn't paying attention. He almost choked me out a couple minutes later. I'm like, "Oh shit, this dude snuck it
That's
on so quick." Because
hilarious.
those kids got those bony arms. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, dude, I'm sorry, Owen, you're gonna get passed out soon."
It's just a matter of time at this point.
But no, that might be fun. The Bohemian Grove. I'm
Yeah.
gonna come
Yeah,
to
it'd
that.
be
Yeah,
awesome,
June 20th and June 21st in Leesburg, Florida.
How
Show
far
out.
from, like Miami and stuff is that? 'Cause I
It's
need to go to
like
Miami pretty soon.
probably a
anyways.
few hours from Miami. It's like I think
hour drive,
maybe
or-
like an hour out of Orlando or less. It's not far
So
out of
probably
Orlando.
fly into Orlando.
Yeah, Orlando
Yeah.
would be the move to go into there. It's
Then
not
maybe-
far. Leesburg. It's up near where Top Lobster and all them have their setup to be Top Lobster, Clint Russell, Raven, and
I looked
Nephilim
my
Death
schedule.
Squad.
Oh, Clint too.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm gonna try to
Clint's
come.
too,
That
yeah.
sounds fun.
Yeah, no, it'll be a blasty blast. We're doing the first day is gonna be conspiracy. Second day is gonna be comedy. It's unofficially gonna be called Ripapalooza because the idea is future. We're gonna launch a comedy. It's gonna be in the future. We want to have
Very
a
politically
conspiracy comedy or conspiracy event every so
And a
often,
rape
and
event.
then a comedy event every so often. Oh come on, that's hilarious. Like let's be real.
I think it's
I
funny.
think it's
I
funny
think
to call
it's
it
funny.
Palooza, and then
yeah.
when everyone inevitably gets upset about it, then you could have
Free
those
press.
fun like PR, like apologizing and be like, Palooza was never meant to be this sort of environment. Like consent is very important to us. Like,
What are you guys talking about?
so we're gonna do
we
have
just think
that.
we just think joking about rape's funny.
Yeah, like we can literally play the leftist game and literally respond how they would, but just always like referencing Rape Palooza over and over again.
I think I'm coming to Palooza.
Yeah, so we got
Awesome.
Rape Palooza day 2. That's comedy.
You guys
That's
ever-
gonna be Owen.
You guys
running
ever
it.
came to Skankfest out here in Vegas?
I
Or
have
that's a
not
blast?
yet.
man,
I've heard
I
it's a
would love to.
blasty blast. Like, let's be real. To some extent, like we are following the footprints of giants here. So it is like, let's be real. I mean, I don't know the whole idea of podcasters and having like a festival that we're kind of building up. I mean, we obviously, I think in a lot of ways our stuff's a distinct thing, but it is like obviously, I mean, we'd be lying if we didn't take inspiration from them. So like,
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
you got to give him credit. 'Cause
yeah,
obviously
absolutely.
There's some similarities. He's
No, I
100%
mean that's where
credit,
Tower
but-
Game's born out of. We were all mostly like political guys, or were also interested in like comedy, and so that just kind of became our comedy outlet. I'm not saying we're necessarily hilarious. We have a fun time. We have a good crew of
Get
people that show
serious,
up.
but you got to
regularly.
joke
Yeah.
around occasionally
Yeah.
when you're being
Yeah,
serious.
and-
Yeah, otherwise the darkness sets
Yeah,
in. right?
I got it. It's
No,
like
like this-
therapy.
Yeah, this is the first comedy festival, right? You got two at least two huge acts coming in, other
Yep.
big people. That's a great
Yeah, we got
start.
Shane Cashman coming as well.
Oh, nice.
I mean, we're still very early.
I
We're
might
recording
be
this.
coming there.
I mean, we're
yeah,
recording this in what, April right now, so we're still 2 months away, and so we have, I'm sure, more people will
who's the
follow
main
through.
guy running it? Is it Top
Top
Lobster?
Lobster
I'll
is
talk to him.
he's Top Lobster Productions, baby. We're
See
all
if I
coming
can-
together.
I
Yeah.
can't film the comedian, but see if I can go in there and film some of the other stuff.
Oh,
and,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Awesome.
yeah. I mean, he'd be happy to have you.
Get distracted. We better
Yeah,
circle
no,
back
I mean,
to,
hey, I'm glad we got a chance to promote it because I do think it's going to be a really fun event. I'm really looking forward. I didn't get to make it to the last one. Unfortunately, I have an epileptic wife, and she chose that time to Twitch out. So that was
Oh, man.
it's like, come on,
That's
honey,
fucked up.
really, right now?
kind of like a girl's pregnant, decides to have a kid, like when you're out like drinking all night.
Oh, shit.
Or my friend's out partying all night. This girl had the kid early, and he's like coming down and shit. And it's like, I'm like, you should yell at your wife for.
I was telling him that like I literally was like about to walk out the door, and then my wife then started a seizure. I was like,
Damn it.
All right.
Oh my God.
Just kidding, honey. If you watch this, I love you. I never at any point ever entertained the idea of leaving you twitching on the floor.
I'm sure she doesn't. I'm sure she doesn't watch you. Don't worry, you're good.
No, she'll never watch this.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Well, I will say this is the one time she actually ever cared about anything I ever did podcasting because
She might
she's a
watch
huge UFC fan. So it's
That's
like,
awesome.
Your wife's awesome then.
yeah. So
Yeah,
she was like, it was like, I was like, oh, I'm going to Tim Pool, and she's like, who? You're like, oh, I'm going on Dave Smith's show. You're like, who? You're like,
Dave Smith's cool. Tim Pool's the correct. That's the correct reaction.
well, I'm just like, you know, the people that you know or throw names. She's like, I don't know any of these influencers. But like, UFC's like, oh, okay.
No, Dave Smith's great. And I like, you know,
Yeah,
he's
he's
always
great.
stood up for me. He's constantly attacked for coming on my podcast
Yeah.
of all things. I've had tons of big people on here too. It's not like, but then they try to be like, well, you're on Jake Shields' podcast, but he always sticks up for me.
No,
That's awesome.
Dave's
Dave's
awesome.
the best,
yeah, he was
man.
probably he's played a huge role in like inspiration for me. Like my political involvement at least. I consider myself an anarcho-capitalist. Not that we're doing political theory here, but it was Dave Smith that kind of brought me to that. It's why I'm so anti-war. It's why really I vehemently hate the feds. And that's kind of what I guess sent me down this.
Yeah.
I mean, my show used to be a lot more like political theory, and then it was funny enough. It was the Oklahoma City bombing when I brought Richard Booth on. That was like kind of was like
Really
the show
woke you up.
became more of a conspiracy. Like I mean, I still cover political theory and stuff sometimes, but this show is like almost entire. Like it's what. Like I guess once you get the theory down, it's like now I want to like actually study examples of the theory in action of like I know in theory this government is evil and corrupt in every way, and I don't think it should even exist. And I'm literally giving you examples one by one of why. This is what happens when you let power run corrupt.
There's so many reasons.
Yes.
Yeah. For me, I've always been super anti-war. You know, my dad was actually a Green Beret. He was super gung-ho, but then he served. He wasn't in Vietnam, but he was over doing shit in the Middle East at the time. I wish I'd have got more specifics. And he was always just never join the army.
Yeah.
They're bad. I know he felt like he'd done some things that weren't good. I don't
That's
know
what he
specifics,
told you?
unfortunately. Yeah, he's
That's
just like,
amazing.
we weren't the good guys. I was out there
Yeah.
doing fucked up shit, you know.
He
doing,
became
like,
disenfranchised then. huh?
disenfranchised. Yeah,
I
came
don't
It
on
blame
happens
him.
to a
him.
lot
He's
of
just
us.
like, it was so bad.
I mean, I want to be very clear. I was never in combat for those. I was an aircraft mechanic, so I'm not at all trying to claim similar experience. But yeah, a lot of us in the service get disillusioned. We start to see through it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the specifics of what my dad did.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure if I would question him more, I would have. But I know he felt like he wasn't doing good things in the Middle East, like Iran, and like I think that's when the Shah was in. So he was doing stuff for him. They had him doing like.
I mean, we had the
Green Beret,
Yemen
he was doing
stuff
some
going
kind
on.
of special things.
We had the Yemen stuff going on when I was in. That was what really did it for me. There was like a supercut that went around a while back with Dave Smith and Scott Horton that used to do the rounds all the time. Just like perfect little edit that tugs your heartstrings. That's what really just was like, oh my god, I'm just like part of an evil apparatus here.
Yeah, exactly.
When you see
Like-
these kids getting murdered and stuff, I don't know how someone can.
I
see
mean,
this
it's like
think
I get
okay.
it. Like I fix planes, and those planes then went and refueled planes that then went and dropped bombs
But
on
you were
people, and you're
still
like, so
part
it's
of it.
like. I don't know. Yeah, the pay's good, but you're like,
But you're still part of the murder. Yeah,
like-
I have a friend that shot someone in Iraq, a guy. And he thinks about it all the time. He's
Yeah.
like, I don't know. Does this guy have kids? Did he have this? Because he don't really think it. He didn't think he shot him right. He's just like, I don't remember the exact situation. It's like in a car thing. He shot. He says it haunts him all the time. He'll hit him and just like, oh, this guy could have kids. Like I don't know.
tragic.
Like,
Yeah,
can
it's
you
messed
imagine?
up.
Like that's so terrible.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
I'm
it's tragic as
like,
hell.
I'm not really too much of a softie, but man, kids, like, I mean, I have two
brother.
daughters, 15 and 12-year-old, and so like, man, kids, like, I don't know, that's the one thing that'll make me cry. So like, I mean, we're about to know here in the next episode soon.
Yeah, that's
we're gonna
get
go
really
into that,
dark.
and it's like
So,
that is like a
yeah. We better hit some.
Yeah, we should probably,
better
throw
circle
some
back to the
jokes.
important point. Well, let's circle back to the important points in Oklahoma
Yeah.
City bombing, and then we kind of do a recap, like for idiots, the important parts.
Well, I'll
Oh,
take
that-
on. Let me take on Jesse Trent, and then if you want to give a
That's
breakdown
cool.
of the
This is
Yiki
like,
story, because
yeah,
okay,
that, totally.
good. Yeah,
I'm down for that. But I never actually you mentioned the Veterans Aryan movement, right? And I just think that like knowing what what Jesse truly believed PatCon was. I mean, and again, I had mentioned right what Ruby Ridge 92, 6 months later Waco. Then 95, we have the Alfred P. Murrow building, federal
They
building. just
needed
getting-
to get some good press because they had a
John
lot of bad
Matthews
press.
claimed that PatCon was involved.
That's what
Obviously,
he
we
said.
don't see it. It's like we don't know
So-
the specifics, but involved in Waco.
That's what he
And
said. Ruby
didn't he
Ridge.
say Ruby Ridge as well? Yeah.
Ruby
And
Ridge,
OKC.
they raided a guy, right? I think
Yeah.
they killed
Weaver.
where they shot his kids. And
Yeah.
He
wife.
murdered his
Everywhere.
wife with she's holding
the
their
baby.
her baby in her arms, and by the way, she was the priority target because they believed her influence was actually affecting Randy's willingness to negotiate with the hostage
to
negotiators.
negotiate, yeah.
It's fascinating stuff.
Shot her holding a baby. Just what demon
Man,
people.
and by the
Was it
way,
ATF
that
or
was
FBI?
Lon
What was that?
Horiuchi.
Yeah, that was Lon Horiuchi.
Fuck Lon
The
Horiuchi. Me and all my
sniper.
friends hate Lon
who-
Horiuchi.
who is
Hate
that?
this dude.
Who's Lon?
So Lon Horiuchi was basically he was in special forces and he was one of the most advanced snipers that was sent from Quantico, Virginia
I
is
forget. You'd know better than I would.
specifically where the sniper team was sent from to Ruby Ridge. And by the way, he himself then had confirmed kills 6 months later at Waco as well. So that's who this guy was. and yeah, and it's just some you know, actually his I forget if he's Japanese or it's very
Asian,
strange to see. You know, some foreign sniper conducting domestic operations,
foreigners coming in killing American citizens. Like, this is like, this guy should be freaking hung.
Well, I don't know if he was an American citizen, but it is like, you know, like I guarantee you, if I knew your past, probably like you would probably want to think twice about that.
That's
like,
what I'm saying,
like
yeah.
I mean, hell, like Vietnam, or. But I guess we should circle back. I do want to, you know, obviously we've mentioned Jesse trying to do like a ton today, so I feel like it would, you know, how do we not, you know, mention the people who have, you know, kind of died along the way, and kind of what brought him into this. Now, as we mentioned with John Doe 2 earlier, John Doe 2 was, you know, you've mentioned multiple times how J6 was one of the biggest FBI operations. Well, at that point in time, this was the biggest manhunt. It was John Doe 2. They were looking for the second guy. I mean, they found McVeigh within like a couple
90
days.
minutes, I think it was.
Well, they got him, but they didn't know it was him. It took like a day before because they put out the.
They knew.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. There's a lot of implications. Of like, I think they knew. But like, there is, you know, official story. It's like, hey, they put out the records. He started being recognized here and there. They put together the pieces, and ta-da! Now
we already have him in jail.
Yeah,
What
we
a
already have him in jail.
coincidence.
Yeah, here we go. Never find John Doe
with
2.
his handbooks, with his racism.
Yeah. But essentially, we have, you know, just one other point that kind of ties this. We have in John Doe 2, we have obviously the bombing happened April 19th, and then in May, there's internal FBI memos saying to essentially all leads on John Doe 2, essentially just throw them out. Put them into abeyance is what it's called, which is a fancy term for just we're not pursuing those leads anymore. So essentially, behind closed doors, the FBI is no longer looking into. They're still publicly facing, oh, yeah, we're looking into it, blah, 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 blah. And about a month later after that, June, is when they go, oh, now we're not doing it. Well, roughly around that time is also when a certain person named Kenneth Threaddew died under extremely suspicious circumstances. Now, Kenneth Threaddew, he was a Vietnam vet. He left. He had a drug problem when he got out. He did actually rob some banks and do some things that he got in trouble for. Now he went to jail. He served his time. Got out. He was on parole. And he eventually essentially told one of the conditions of his parole is he couldn't drink. He essentially told his parole. He did try to fight it. He got his brother, Jesse, the lawyer, to try to help him. Just like, hey, if you could change the terms of it. Essentially, they wouldn't. And he's like, yeah, I want beer. I want to drink. And they go, nope, we're not going to change terms. And he goes like, okay, well, I'm just going to let you know, I'm done showing up. So you know where I am. If you want to come get me, I'm not coming back to parole meetings anymore. So. Okay, went a long ass time. Yeah. No one ever bugged him. One of these days, he's crossing over the Mexican border back into California, and that's when they stop him. This is when we have the John Doe 2 manhunt going on, and then for some reason they take him from over there in Cali, and they decide, well, you need to go over to Oklahoma. So we send you over to the Federal Transfer Center of Oklahoma. We're not entirely sure why. It doesn't really make sense. His parole officer was over in Cali. Everything was in Cali. It doesn't really make sense. So, whatever. They send him to the Federal Transfer Center, and it's there that, he had I think the day before he talked to his brother, and he was in good spirits. He had a new child, which is this is another one that really, what the hell? He's literally just was getting his life together. He was he had he got married. He had a child. He was on the back on the path, working, wasn't using drugs.
He was on an upward swing.
Yeah, he was. Things were coming together. But we have this guy that matches in so many ways the description of John Doe 2. John Doe 2 was described as being kind of around kind of generally my build, kind of short, stocky. Kind of 5'6", 5'7", 5'8" ish. Kind of that realm. Kind of stocky guy, slightly darker complexion, not dark, but maybe a light skinned black fella, Middle Eastern, maybe even somebody like me that has a little bit more of a tan. We kind of have a little bit tan here, just a little bit dark, not like a pale fella. And so he kind of matched in a lot of ways. Also a dragon tattoo on the arm, which was very similar to Trendew's.
And he had a dragon tattoo.
He also has bank robbery, and we mentioned the ARA earlier. So it's it's a theory that John Doe 2 maybe was a bank robber. So it's you have this guy hitting all the different points of boom, boom, boom. This sounds like could be John Doe 2. No, he wasn't. Invite people if they want to go search into it. Maybe if they do want. I've never really dug too deep into that. There's nothing really suggests that he isn't. It clearly looks like they got the wrong man because Richard Guthrie Jr. Richard Guthrie later he died, who looked almost exactly like Kenneth Threaddew. Yep. So to the John Doe 2 thing, a lot of people think he may have been John Doe 2 or one of the John Doe 2s, because a lot of people go well, I don't think he's John. Well, it's kind of a misnomer because there's multiple.
Because there's a few guys.
Yeah. So, but anyway, he dies shortly. He's another person.
They said, or what do they say?
Suicide. Another suicide. Richard Guthrie.
Unusual brand new kid.
He's at the point.
Life an upward swing.
At that point, he's talking to was it Newsweek, I think, and he was also talking to. He was getting ready to go to some grand juries. Was doing was also getting ready to write his own book. Was talking about how he's gonna blow the whistle and blah blah blah.
Oh, yeah, so right, I'm blowing the whistle. Yeah. Oh, so I had to shoot myself instead. Yeah. I got all this information. Bam.
Now Kenneth Threaddew. Back to his death. There were 2 inmates that overheard him, overheard what sounded like sounds akin to torture. Now they were willing to testify. Both of them end up dead.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. No, they one from a drug overdose, one from suicide. And then I think I might have mentioned Norman. Did I mention Norman Pearl later? Maybe I'm forgetting. But there's Norman Pearl, who was an expert videographer. Who, I mentioned him earlier. He's the one who died of a heart attack. So we have all these people just dropping dead around this guy. Obviously, Norman Pearl's heart attack, but obviously, anyone who knows about the church committee knows about that they had heart attack guns. I'm not saying they used a heart attack gun. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. But it's like
it's not
we have all these people dropping down around somebody who already dropped from something suspicious and bop 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 bop. I think I meant to get to earlier. There's another character named Dr. Fred Jordan, who, in how characters can change. When this first started, he was the medical examiner, and his story was that this was all botched because whenever he died, they initially were trying to cremate him. They were doing all sorts of weird stuff without the family's approval. They actually cleaned up the room immediately. The only way they were able to get evidence later, they came in with luminol because the place had been scrubbed down. Which luminol is the stuff you spray, you can see blood.
Lights it up.
So that was the only way they were able to do any sort of CSI anything because it had been scrubbed down, bleached, everything.
Tried to cremate his body, right?
Yeah, they tried to cremate his body. Yeah,
man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just. Honestly,
but Dr. Fred Jordan, I remember the point I was getting at.
Yeah.
Initially, he was the hero of the story because he was the medical examiner. Right. They tried to come to him and be like, because he was a medical examiner for the hospital, they tried to come to him and say, hey, we want your approval because you're a medical examiner and we can kind of do this with your approval to do that. And he goes, no, that's for the family to decide. We're not going to do that. Exactly. And he's been on record multiple times making statements about how this was all botched. This looks very, very fishy, heavily implicating, something else going on. And then at one point, he just flips. I mean, I forget exactly how Jesse characterized it. There's an interview where he talks about how, but he essentially says that he kind of in a paraphrase, essentially he got a call from Dr. Fred, Fred Jordan, kind of like, hey, I'm sorry, kind of essentially that was sorry. I mean, didn't really explicitly say it, was just kind of so I don't know. And he said he heard the fear in his voice, kind of deal. So I'm like,
probably got a threat on his family or something,
I don't know. But then later, Terrence Yeeke, who's another character, I'll pass it off to him in a second to break that down. Now he when that comes up, this other suspicious stuff. Now Fred Jordan is very much. No, I've despite this being one of the fishiest suicides you'll have ever seen, I've seen some very crazy suicides out there in the world. Isn't that weird, huh? Yeah. Isn't it weird how tones seem to change when you get a little talking to? So then how and I mentioned the William Mueller earlier, just how if you look at how the game was played, the people dropping, how that can shape narratives. Yep. I mean, there's another character that we didn't really get into, but I feel like maybe people should dig into to look into the Roger Moore earlier. He's another character who was clearly an accomplice that got turned witness, turned prosecution. So it's like they play these games.
Threats, threats
well,
of prison,
he was
death.
almost he was CIA and an FBI informant. There's multiple things confirming that.
So where they're going to get put in prison if they don't flip. That's something they use commonly. They get them testify. Otherwise they're going to go 10 years in jail. That's a common one they use.
That's what Michael Conosciuto said in the Octopus, right? The Rand Contra. Just another overlapping thread that kind of ties in. If he's telling the truth, if he's being legitimately honest, he was claiming that he was basically set up after he was essentially a part of weapons testing and honestly what that really ties back to is the Promise Software scandal, but we won't get into it because it's just too much. But
right, I know we could have got multiple hours to see. We have another one coming up pretty soon. Right. Real quick, why don't you give just a quick 2 to 5 minute breakdown of the key points for Oklahoma City? And then we'll talk a little more. And then I said we'll send people to your longer one because there's clearly so much more.
There's so we kind of touch a lot of the broad things, but I would say at a basic, the thing to remember: surveillance tape, over 20 surveillance tapes. That's big. That there was actually what was her name? Pamela Match, I believe her name was. I have it written down. Pamela Matson, who was an FBI, who was actually an FBI agent who was charged by the court to review all her surveillance tapes and give her account of it. And she even said there was 2 that had evidentiary value, which what that means is that it showed the bombing, the vehicle or the suspects. Now we never saw those, obviously. So I mean, just between that, the John Doe 2, there's so much to confirm it. I mean, literally within days, you have feds officially and unofficially corroborating the idea of they have surveillance tapes. In trial, you have them saying tapes in plural, saying this at least more than one.
The tapes were never released.
No, and their argument for why they couldn't produce them at one point because they would essentially interfere with the investigation.
I think
which is we're doing the trial for the investigation.
I think the explosions 10 seconds apart is a pretty big deal too. That's they don't even deny there was 2 explosions. There's no their justification makes 0 sense.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that we've mentioned multiple justifications throughout this, and you kind of
probably the biggest, the ATF just not being at work that day.
Yeah.
That was who was being targeted allegedly. That's just insane.
And who
That
paid
is
the price
wild.
instead? Innocent people.
And these people do kill people. Look what they did at Waco. They went and killed, 80, 90 people, 25 kids. I don't know the exact number. They killed a lot of people. It shows these are like terrible. They went and sniped the guy's wife holding a baby. What kind of these are evil people we're dealing with.
And they were playing around with the rules of engagement, right? For just the feds at the time, and it's a disgusting thing. Like what they were actually attempting to greenlight at that point, especially in Ruby Ridge and in Oklahoma City, or in Waco, I mean. But yeah, I don't know. The funny thing about Richard Lee Guthrie that you brought up earlier was that it was the next day that he was set to do the television interview, right? Which is just so crazy that he was going to blow the lid off the Oklahoma City bombing.
That's when he
and he's found hung in his own jail cell.
Hung himself the day before.
And he's the one who's like a dead ringer for Jesse turned to his brother.
Exactly. Plus, people don't kill themselves when they have something big coming up. It's like a thing, obviously something big against them. You're not going to kill yourself.
Like you have a
I'm
newborn?
breaking this tomorrow. Instead I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
I can't wait one day.
I'm going to kill myself despite having a newborn, a new wife, and this is a parole violation. Like, it's not a major legal thing. Like, I don't know, maybe you would spend, a few weeks of some illegal fines. I don't know. Nothing crazy. There's nothing to kill yourself over. They did say throughout that they tried to misinterpret things he said over the phone via transcripts and tried to say he had AIDS. Because he said something about it being a travel age thing, I believe was the words he used, and then they misinterpreted what he said and said it was an AIDS thing, and then they interpret that to mean, we had AIDS. That's why he killed himself. Like, what?
So ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, no, he didn't have AIDS. He wasn't gay. He had I guess, I don't know, maybe you could say intravenous drug use, but there's nothing to imply
pretty much
that.
only gay people get AIDS.
Yeah, like, it's also not what he said.
They talk about AIDS all the time, and you realize, like, you don't really get AIDS if you're straight. That was the big lie they pushed on.
I'd feel bad if I didn't mention Yiki, though. So, because,
100%.
Yeah, Terrence Yiki, I mean, as I said, he was the first one, but then a year later, he dies. And now there's a long story with him. I mean, I highly recommend it. It's episode 7 of my series where I go into Yiki. Plus, as I mentioned, I've done an interview with Tanya. It's because this is Terry's story is what really brought me into this, because there was this video, this clip from this YouTube, or this not YouTube, but this Twitter user named Jinx. You may have seen him before at Crack Connoisseur in the past.
Sure,
he's been nuked a million times, but he used to post these things called edits, and then he had a famous edit that would always do the numbers, which was the Yiki edit, which was like a couple minute little song and stuff, and goes into his story. But yeah, he was the first one to show up. They found like there was a report that was multiple pages long. They said, no, you can't do this. I mean, to kind of, as I mentioned with his wife, his ex-wife said that, like, hey, he came to me, said they're lying. There's the letter with Ramona McDonald where he implies that, like, this was like Sting gone wrong, is heavily implying this. And then he dies, about a year and some change later. Yeah. Do you have something to say?
Oh, just the fact that when he goes and he's like meeting with Tanya, right? And he's going to her house at all different hours of the night.
Yeah, he tried to get her to sign life insurance papers.
Trying to get her to sign life insurance policies because he couldn't live with himself, and trying to get her to remarry him. Yeah, also because he couldn't live with himself if something were to happen to them. And
he had 2 children with her. Yeah,
yeah, and essentially also. Which I always found anyway, I don't want to like go too much into the depth of the details if we haven't quite, but
yeah, he was, to put it simply, he was found. His car was found. It was near federal land. Oh man! Essentially on some back road. His car was found with about 2 liters of blood in it. And now they found his body either a half a mile to a mile and a half. Yeah, I've looked it up before. 2 liters is about the amount where you're like. You're probably losing consciousness.
You're walking.
Now this is a guy with sickle cell anemia. This is a guy, a big boy with sickle cell anemia. And so the idea is, theoretically, what we're saying here is that he was found a half mile to a mile and a half through very rough terrain.
Bleeding that much.
Yeah, you're not. So like they found like a blade in there and stuff, but they found that much blood, all the damage, and then you find his body a half mile to a mile and a half. I tend to believe the mile and a half figure, but from there in a ditch with a downward trajectory of the bullets. Slightly coming down like this. Keep in mind, he was a corn-fed big dude. Like, he was a big boy. Like, he could have played O-line or something. Like, so and he's strong as hell. And he's down here. Like, you've seen bulky guys. This is. I'm not even that bulky, and this is kind of a. It
doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
Why are you gonna do this when you just go right here?
Yeah, and so they found grass in the wounds, indicating possible dragging. Yeah. So there was signs of possible other torture. There was lacerations on the wrist, the neck. Yeah. Now, in the medical examiner, they said that was slippage due to partial decomposition, which I don't know. I guess I'm no coroner, but that doesn't sound to match to me. The fact that he would have decomposition within that short a period of time, because he wasn't out there that long.
Slip and slide a mile away.
So that was to explain the cuts on the throat, is what that was. And so, And now there's also striations on his wrist, implying either some
Tied
sort
or
of ties or something like that. So there's a lot to his story. I highly recommend people go check that out. There are other deaths we haven't even mentioned, other suspicious deaths. There was like
last time we got to wrap up. But why don't you?
But yeah, I think we did it. We covered the basics.
People that want to go in depth, check out your podcast and anywhere else where you guys can be found. Anything you want to plug real quick before we wrap up?
Man, honestly, you guys can find me at the Underclass Podcast. It's what that's kind of my solo work, but it's still an umbrella project between me and Jose as well, because we kind of like publish a lot of the the content that we do together as well is under the Underclass Podcast. You can find it there. And beyond that, man, the best place you can support me, my patreon.com/the Underclass Podcast. And there's a few incentives in place. Like I'm doing a paywalled show with Sam Tripoli and Brad Binkley, who
Nice.
Yeah.
I just had Sam on last week.
Yeah,
so.
man. And by the way, Sam, dude, I describe it as we are essentially disciples of Sam Tripoli at this moment. And like just as far as like he's legitimately opened the door for me in many ways, and nothing but love and respect.
His boss is great too. I hadn't really listened to it until I booked him as a guest, and I checked it out. I'm like, oh, he's doing a lot of really cool stuff.
Awesome, man. Yeah,
like I'm trying to do more stuff like that, conspiracy stuff. Like, you're doing really good stuff. So. Yeah. Cool, man. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, and I have the No Way Jose podcast.
You're good. You can't talk, Jose.
I have the No Way Jose podcast. Now, as he mentioned, we put out a lot of content together. We both have our own solo content on our channels, but we dual stream to our stuff.
Who makes better content?
Me, of course. But I'm Austin's biggest fan. I'll tell you, he creates better content. Go follow him. But
Austin's like, yeah, I do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. But we put out 2 shows together. We do the Morning Dump, which is our Monday through Friday daily show at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. We alternate between us hosting. Sometimes we host both, but it's a Monday through Friday. I mean, one of us is covering it. We cover kind of the daily current events. Sometimes we'll do some deep cuts of some older stuff that we like to cover, but new stuff going on, what's going on with Israel, what's going on with foreign policy, what's going on with the newest conspiracy stuff. And then we also do a weekly live call-in show. So, that's at Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. That's already dead is what that's called. That's where you can call in.
Just talk shit
yeah, you call in, talk shit. I mean, so hell yeah, I'd love to have you call in. So, yeah, then also like I have my No Way Jose stuff, so definitely follow both of us because you're not going to
Jake. Yeah, so you can always come.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude.
Or you guys are not in studio though, right? You do stuff. You come
no, we always do it over StreamYard or something.
We're just pores.
I do it a little bit occasionally. Right. Yeah, it's fucking not cheap getting the podcast running and flying people.
No, I think we're working towards it though. I have this Dangerous Retard shirt on right here. This is my buddy Clint in Top Lobster and Raven's show, and I think that's the idea. I think that's what they're building towards. They're building, I think, a live type thing. We're making stuff happen. We're moving culture. I think that likely in the not too near future, you might be seeing some sort of similar setup from this rough cast of people. And we've been doing podcasts with each other since like the jump, like me, Clint, me, Top. Like I mean, I think a little bit of an audience when we first started, but
before too.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously the one who
right?
Yeah, huh?
He has a really big platform, I think. Clint.
Yeah, I mean, Clint's definitely the one who friggin' went to the stratosphere far more than the rest of us. Top followed him a little bit behind, but like Top's our Luis Gomez. He's the shaker and mover. That's what he is. And then Clint's like our Dave Smith. Like he's the one doing crazy big stuff out there.
Right.
Hey, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate having us. Yeah, it was awesome.